Good morning, everyone. I'll call to order Marin Waters Watershed Committee and special board meeting of December 18, 2025. Terry, could we have roll call, please?
Good morning. Director Sampson,
Here.
Director Smith,
Here.
Director Mayer, and Chair Cush.
Here.
Currently not present is Director Russell.
Thank you. Terry, any board comments on today's agenda? Terry, any public comments on the agenda?
There are none.
Then do we have a motion to adopt today's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Director Mayer.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sampson.
Yes.
Director Smith.
Aye.
Chair Cush.
Aye. Next, any public comments on non-agenda items?
There are none.
Okay, we'll move on to our regular agenda then. The first item is approval of the meeting minutes from our last Watershed Committee and Special Board meeting, which was held on September 18th, 2025. And the minutes are included in today's meeting packet. Any board comments on the meeting minutes?
Nope.
Terry, any public comments?
None.
Then do we have a board motion to accept the meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote again, please.
Director Mayer.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sampson.
Yes.
Director Smith.
Aye.
Chair Cush.
Aye.
Thank you.
Now, moving into the substantive part of the meeting, we're going to be starting with our biodiversity, fire, and fuels integrated plan, which was adopted in 2019 and has been operational now for 6 years. Today, we'll be receiving an annual report for fiscal year 2025 on the implementation of the plan. And I just want everyone to note it covers the period from July 2024 to June 2025. Sean, Carl, please.
Yeah, good morning, committee members. Sean Horn, Director of Watershed Resources. I'm joined with Carl Sanders, our Natural Resource Program Manager, and Lauren Jenkins, our Project Coordinator for our BIFIP. We have a presentation that we prepared for you. Let me pull it up real quick. So this is our annual report for our Biodiversity, Fires, and Fuels Integrated Plan. The district adopted it in 2019, and we bring forward our annual report each year to highlight kind of the work completed in alignment with the planned execution for various vegetation management targets that we have. And we break down all the costs to kind of have a review and discussion around our acres treatment costs, and as well as kind of new priorities. So the presentation we've prepared for you, we're going to talk about some of the coordination that goes on to allow us to implement this work, some of the environmental compliance that we do before, during, and after the work is completed to track kind of change over time and ensure that we're protecting resources. We'll walk through each of the vegetation management actions that's described in the BIFIP and the work that was completed and how we did in regards to the targets that we have. We'll talk through the management costs as a whole, and then we'll look forward to our work plan for the coming year. And so a lot of what we cover throughout the review of this year, we'll also be looking at in the work plan. So there will be more at the end. I'm going to hand it over to Carl, who's going to start us with an overview and then walk us through some of our activities for the year.
Good morning, Carl Sanders, Natural Resource Manager, Program Manager. Again, BIFIP adopted 2019, our Biodiversity, Fire, and Fuels Integrated Plan. It gives us a programmatic approach for managing vegetation on the watershed and balance between fire hazards and ecosystem function. Goals: minimizing fire risk from wildfire, preserving and enhancing our biological resources, and then providing an adaptive framework, which is what we're doing today for the annual report. Management actions are what we do each year. We have 27 of them that involve monitoring, inventorying, planning, as well as the on-the-ground actions that we take to treat vegetation, and included in that is our annual report. Delay there. This is a map. Again, year 6. We're now into year 7, but this is a map showing what we completed for year 6. target or threshold within our CEQA document is, about 1,800 acres. We implemented about 1,500 acres or almost 1,600 acres, a little shy of the threshold or target due to delay in one of our contracts and just some variability from year to year on broom management acres. Total cost was about $3.6 million. You'll see in a later slide when you include environmental compliance in there, it comes close to about 4 million.
And then we'll just note on this one, this includes our grant funding. So the district's been successful in the last couple of years bringing in grant funding from CAL FIRE, Wildlife Conservation Board, Coastal Conservancy, and other funding entities. So this is about $1 million in grant funding this year that went towards the implementation of FY 2025.
Ongoing coordination planning that we do with other agencies. Red flag mornings. When we're shutting the mountain down, as do other agencies in the county. We had eight red flag warnings last year. Ongoing coordination with county fire in terms of prescribed burn planning, coordination with Fire Safe Marin, MWPA, and on their technical advisory committee, as well as the newer collaboration with the Prescribed Burn Cooperative in the county. Continuing, I should say, coordination with PG&E with their transmission and distribution line and maintenance of their rights of way across our watershed. 27 miles last year and 67 acres of land that we coordinated with them. Leases that we have on the mountain, from West Point Inn, the Middle Peak Comm site, and the Marin Stables, coordinating vegetation treatment and defensible space work with them as well. You'll hear at a later presentation this morning about the volunteer coordination that we do in terms of using volunteers to help us implement BIFIP management actions, as well as use that for an outreach tool when we take them on hikes and such. Ongoing monitoring and inventorying, long list of things that we do prior to work, and then from year to year, annual osprey monitoring, resilient forest study, slot monitoring that we do in-house, yellow leg frog monitoring, up on Big Carson, invasive plant monitoring, rare plant mapping that we do prior to all BIFIP management actions, forest and pest pathogen studies that we've done, cultural resource studies that we do prior to prescribed burning, crew trainings that occur for contractors, our own staff, annual northern spotted owl monitoring, pre-vegetation nesting bird nesting surveys those occur again prior to all vegetation work during nesting season. You'll hear a little bit more later in the talk too about some post-vegetation impact studies that we're doing with nesting birds, or BIFIP effects studies, and rare plant compliance surveys. We do those in advance of work, and those are good for 5 years when we pick new sites that we need surveyed each year. Wildlife Picture Index is what you see the fox down below from. That's with our one-tam partners as part of the Conservancy effort. All right, so I'm just going to give you a quick overview of some of the management actions that we take each year, and the type of work that we're doing, and the acres and the costs associated. So for fuel break maintenance, we're doing fuel breaks in strategic locations throughout the county. That maintenance is intended to basically change fire behavior through reducing fuel loads. The pile burning is one maintenance tool that we use for treating cut vegetation. Different from prescribed burning. We came close to 200 acres in that last FY for a cost of $285,000. Cyclic maintenance, stuff that we're doing every year, from fine fuels, defensible space, roadside brushing or mowing, dam maintenance, the different costs associated with that. Using hand crews, using heavy equipment, masticators, dam maintenance. The idea is to keep the woody vegetation off the dam face so that we're left only with annuals growing on the dam face and upstream sides. Broom removal, almost 600 acres last year at $953,000. In all of the new broom work that we're doing, we're trying to only pull broom. We're not using any herbicides. The little bit of mowing that we do is still along some roads and areas that have had significant mowing in the past. It's just very difficult to pull, but about 600 acres this last year. In 25, we were able to do an addendum that merged all of our management actions into one. It's about, I think, 700 acres plus for our threshold now for broom maintenance or management. New fuel break construction. We did about 6 acres last year. Rather expensive. It turned almost $30,000. Lauren will talk about that. But basically, as we construct new fuel break and more and more difficult locations and or challenging locations, the cost per acre does go up. This is an example of a tank along Liberty Gulch tank along Bolinas Fairfax Road. Early detection, rapid response with our one-TAM partners, looking at roads, patches of priority weeds and new invasives, mapping them and treating them. It's not an out-of-pocket cost that we had this year. This is an example of pampas grass or jubata that we have in various locations of the mountain that we try to stay on top of. Forest fuel reduction, a lot of what we do. We did 9 acres, $61,000. Forest maintenance is going back to the areas that we previously treated. That was 143,000 acres at a cost of 482,000. I think we would have gotten a little more forest maintenance done had we had one of our maintenance contracts in place a little sooner.
And maybe hold on that slide for a second. So 9 acres, we did do an addendum this last year to increase our acreage for forestry work. The 9 acres this year was kind of a result of our 3-year contract with our forestry contractors expiring, and we came to the Watershed Committee in a previous subsequent board meeting to get new contracts completed. That kind of shrunk our seasonal window to do the forestry work, so we didn't achieve kind of our acre targets for forestry. However, now we do have 2 new contractors that are fully, under contract for the next 3 years that'll be supporting us as we scale this work up. The forestry work is really critical for preparing sites for maybe prescribed fire in the future. So we had in previous years done enough work to have areas prepped for burn planning, but we did come up a little short on this one, so we wanted to flag that.
This one?
No.
Okay. So I'll finish on this one before I hand it off to Lauren. This was a burn that we conducted in, again, FY25. It was a collaborative burn with between Marin Water and State Parks up near the Mountain Theater. It ended up only being 1 acre. We got $12,000 cost associated with that. The burn boss and agency reps made the decision that it was burned a little too hot, getting up in the canopy, and firing ops were ceased, and we went into a control mode. But I still think it was a success. It's a unit that we've continued to do some additional prep from what we learned, and we hope to go back to that unit during this current FY or maybe even in the one after that. And we won't be talking about in this presentation, but in the next and up and coming presentation on the prescribed burns that we did during this current FY. So I'll hand this off to Lauren next.
Good morning, Lauren Jenkins, project coordinator for the Watershed. I'm going to be talking about dug fir thinning and encroachment into grasslands and oak woodlands. First slide here. This is an example, obviously, of the oak woodlands that we're trying to save there. We're trying to save the hardwoods that you see in the photo. This project was up at the Upper Lag Rock Springs project area. This was also a mastication treatment as opposed to a manual treatment. So next slide. Next is management of weeds. In this case, we've got goat grass, yellow star, and everything else. I think the most important point here to point out is that the acres on the yellow star can vary quite a bit because the best time to pick it is right at our fiscal year end. So sometimes those acres are treated in June, sometimes in July. So some years they're double counted, sometimes they're not. But most importantly, though, we know the footprint of the yellow star, and it's generally stable. So next slide. Next slide is a couple examples of some ongoing treatments and experimental weed treatments and restoration work. There's no cost associated with these because we're just kind of monitoring what we've done in the past. And I can confirm that the acacia peeling treatment is our most effective tool against acacia, at least, with our current suite of tools for weeds. And otherwise, yeah, we've been monitoring some thistle and treating the weeds around them up around Potrero Meadow. Next slide is the volunteer contribution to the BIFIP. And there's an entire presentation devoted to the volunteer work following us. So I'll be brief here. Basically, there's several events that focus mostly on weed removal. And we mention it here, though, because the volunteers made a tangible contribution to our weed removal efforts. So, and this is a pretty data heavy slide, but if I can bring your attention to 3 points. The 40,000 an acre cost for construction of new fuel break, the 12,000 an acre cost for prescribed burning in forests, and then the bottom line total vegetation treatment costs per acre. So, as mentioned before, the new fuel break construction was pretty cost heavy. The primary reason for that was because the locations where we chose this year were pretty dense, very overgrown. We also did the work in bird season, so there was, some additional start and stop kind of difficulties associated with that, and waiting for the results of the bird surveys. That high cost is a little bit offset by the fact that we disposed of all the vegetation on site, so it's all chipped and there's no follow-up, burning or disposal costs. But we've implemented some measures to bring that cost down in fiscal year 26, and I'm expecting that trend to decline next year.
Can we hold it there? Because I think you're touching on a really important point that I think needs to be highlighted as we move forward here, and that is the fact that we have, through inaction and not by fault, but just by culture, for a decade, and now we're having to pay the fee for it. Continued inaction will result in having to pay the fee again at some point sooner than later too. So we have to stay on top of this. So I expect, especially the prescribed fire, to drop considerably once we do that. Because do those costs include a lot of the prep work at all in terms of mechanical mastication or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the prescribed burning costs need to be layered. So there is the preparation that might happen a year or 2 years before, and then there's preparation as we develop the burn plan and what the burn boss identifies as additional work that needs to be done. And then there's additional prep for, control lines and other things that come along with it. So when we bring our prescribed fire addendum back, which we'll talk about a little bit later, we'll do an kind of analysis of what a full cost looks like for prescribed fire, just so we have an understanding of that and the sequencing that we do for it.
If you could add in any future projections based on cost reduction through the initial startup, it'd be helpful too to understand, because we have to pay a huge fee to get back in the game, and once we're back in, I think it's going to be a lot more affordable and beneficial. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think the thing to keep in mind as well is our 1995 veg plan, which the BIFIP replaced, was really focused on fuel breaks around and through the watershed. These real interior parts of the watershed we didn't have veg plans for. So that's a real value that the BIFIP is bringing to the district in terms of how we're managing the landscape and doing it from kind of a multi-benefit perspective. But we do anticipate that we've started our forestry work really where we have good access. And Carl spent a lot of time analyzing kind of those areas that we can get in easier and at a lower cost. But as we go kind of deeper into some of these zones that need to be treated, we expect to have some higher costs periodically because of that work needing to happen in different ways. And then I think the other one thing we were going to highlight here is just our compliance costs. And this is just something that we flag every year just so we understand the percentage of it in relationship to the work that we're doing. Our compliance is about 10%, and that's kind of what we've been seeing for the last 6 years. We kind of average about 10% for all this monitoring, inventory, and pre-assessment work that goes on to ensure that we're not just in alignment with the BIFIT, but protecting those resources while we do the work.
But Sean, it's compliance costs, but it's also really analysis of how our actions are impacting the current environment. And I think that's just as important to do because we're taking a step above and beyond what we're required to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So that should be highlighted, and kudos to your crew.
Yeah, thanks for that clarity. Anything else to learn on this?
One quick thing. The prescribed fire cost that you're seeing there reflects all of our costs for that one burn, where we thought we were going to do 8 acres, and we in fact did 1, and so that's why that number is quite high. Going forward, that's not a representative number of scale, So that's all. Thank you.
So we have a few more slides where we're going to talk about our work plan, kind of looking ahead. So, under the theme of adaptive management, we want to look back at what we've been doing for the last 6 years, just recognize that we've really benefited from partnerships with Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. They've actually done work on the water district's lands adjacent to fuel break work that they're doing on maybe county land, private land, and that's been a benefit that we don't see in our costs, right? Because that's actually resources they're bringing to the table. That's a great lift. Our one-TAM partnership, there's been an incredible amount of just resource analysis that's happened. Our forest health strategy that's driving some of our grant funding, really critical. We think that forest health strategy is also going to lay the framework for doing some prescribed fire visioning, like our lands plus state parks, national parks, county parks. What does that look like? We're going to bring county fire into that discussion and really think comprehensively, and we'll get to that when we get into our addendum discussion. We've also integrated some new modeling tools. So we want to understand the efficacy of our treatments. So we did some pathway analysis this last year. We did a presentation to the Watershed Committee on that. We were able to refine some of our work units based on the information that we gathered and the analysis that was done. Looking ahead, we are focused on continuing to scale our prescribed burning and really thinking about that as a long-term tool under our BIFIP. We're expanding our broom removal work around the Fish Grade area. Our forestry work is expanding in the North Rock Springs zone. We'll be continuing to do our weed work across the watershed, and our BIFIP update for scaling is our next slide. I'll just note that on our weed work, we're going to talk to you about our early detection rapid response. And one thing that was highlighted briefly in the presentation of our actions is that we have, for the past 6 years, benefited from the one-TAM group, the Conservancy, having dedicated staff to carry out early detection rapid response work on the watershed. That program is no longer in effect, and so we're having to find ways to do that EDRR work on our lands ourselves. The Conservancy, just from a budget standpoint, didn't see land management as kind of their core role. They're more about connecting people and the philanthropic funding component, and so we're looking at how we can kind of continue to sustain that program. So prescribed fire, we've presented this slide to you. This is kind of projecting out some of the planning work that we intend to do, also identifying some of the prescribed fire sites that have been implemented and the plans that we have in place. We have about 300 acres of plans in place. We're developing additional plans, trying to get to about 800 acres of work. Some of these might drop off as we start reviewing them with the burn boss and developing those burn plans, and we might start modifying them as well. But this is kind of a tease of where we're going. There's a lot of other coordination that goes along with this. So we'll be doing cultural surveys, veg prep, smoke management plans, pre-bio surveys, and then coordinating with our partners to ensure that we can carry this work out. To do this effectively long-term, we were successful this last year doing an addendum to the BIFIP to increase our forestry restoration work, and we're going to recommend that we do another addendum this year for prescribed fire, increasing our acres from 140 acres a year, which it currently is. And under that 140 acres, it says that we'll do 2 projects. And that's a little limiting in terms of how we're seeing prescribed fire coming into kind of our management approach, in terms of we want to have flexibility for when there are seasonal windows that we want to go to different project areas potentially. So that limiting factor of 2 projects doesn't really work. The acreage is somewhat limiting as well. And so we want to just have some more flexibility, and we're trying to dive in to think through kind of what would that be. And there's some, considerations in terms of analyzing the number of acres that we might want to put in here, and thinking through, are those kind of hard goals? Are they, aspirational goals? How we want to think about that, really recognizing that these burn plans are only good for a couple of years and then they need to be reevaluated. There's also a tremendous amount of prep that goes into these sites. So we want to be focused and efficient in how we're prepping areas for burn, and we really want to see those come to fruition so that we're just not prepping areas that don't get burned. And not that it's a lost cost, but we want to make sure that we're using our resources effectively. So we'll talk through all of that as we bring the addendum forward, but our intention right now is to use the on-call contract that the board approved for environmental compliance to do a CEQA addendum. I think this will be fairly straightforward since we've just did one this last year. We'll be bringing to the March Watershed Committee for review and discussion kind of our concept for increasing acreage, kind of an analysis of what those costs for prescribed fire looks like, and a bit of our vision moving forward. But the map on the right is just to kind of show you from a ecological perspective and vegetative community perspective, we have a lot of areas that would benefit from burn. Those are the kind of the light pink areas. The dark red areas are all the areas where we've done forestry work that is kind of prepping for future prescribed fire. And so what you'll see as we bring kind of our vision for prescribed fire forward is kind of linking some of these up long term and kind of providing you all with the justification for why we're placing prescribed burn units at various locations and the thought process behind maintaining those in the long term and the benefit that comes with that, not only from an ecological perspective, from a wildfire risk reduction perspective. There's a number of monitoring efforts that we'll be moving forward with this year. So we have an ongoing plan with the Point Blue Conservation Science for triannual land bird monitoring. Been doing this since the 90s. This is the natural third year that we would be doing this work. We're going to continue doing our vegetative and vegetation analysis that we started last year and reported out to the Watershed Committee on. We've also heard interest in seeing how we can integrate prescribed fire units and understanding the outcomes associated with that with regards to birds. And so we're working with Point Blue to develop some methodologies to integrate that. The early detection rapid response, we're doing an RFP, getting cost proposals to bring that in-house. And so EDRR is our work that we do along our fire roads and our trails. So we have 100 miles of fire roads that we want to survey, 60 miles of trails. We don't survey those every year, but we want to set up a program where we're doing a subset of those every year. You'll recall some of that is also identified in some of our recreation management objectives. And then continuing, something we haven't reported out to the Watershed Committee yet, but we will this year, is continuing our 5-year understory vegetation monitoring. So this is something our botanist is doing in-house, where we've set up transects looking at kind of the understory response to our vegetative treatment activities. And so we'll come forward with some review of what we're finding there, and then kind of long-term how we're intending to move forward with that as well. So next steps, we're going to continue implementing the BIFIP. We've got the addendum that we've identified as coming to the March Watershed Committee, and then 2 contracts that you'll see in early 2026 that'll carry us forward for the next couple of years. So with that, we'll take any questions that you have or discussion that you would like.
Thanks a lot, Sean, Carl, Lauren. Open it up to board questions and discussion. Jed, you want to start?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Just 2 tangential questions. Overall, I'm super supportive. It's really well done and important work. One, I'm curious about our volunteer program and how that's working and related to a lot of this effort and growing, shrinking. I know that a lot of the bikers have offered to help out, and how's that moving along? And then my second unrelated is on the research that you're doing with Point Blue regarding the impact and understory and birds, et cetera. Is there any way we can get an update before 2027, or is there an annual update, or how I'd love to see more in the meantime, if possible.
So the triennial bird monitoring is a year of monitoring work that has to happen until we have some data to share out. So we can give an update as we progress that work, absolutely. And we can maybe bring forward kind of the methodologies we'll be using for looking at some of that. For the volunteer one, I'm going to say hold it for the next presentation. We're going to get into detail for that.
Great. Diana?
Really impressive work. Thank you. all of you. Just a question. I would imagine that that theater site is really important. Are we going to take another go at that next year? What do we have data to inform how we might do it differently, or was it just kind of bad luck on the day?
Absolutely. We're going to take another go at it. We're going to coordinate that with state parks. They've done a little bit more prep from what we learned. We've done the prep as well. We also have other burn units nearby within the Rock Spring vicinity. And it is a critical one in terms of its protection of a resource and a public gathering spot. So we're going to go back.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just note, the conditions on any day can change. And so we're going to be very adaptive as we move forward with prescribed fire in terms of, some days will work out really well and others, we'll have to make decisions like we did where we put a hold on things.
Thanks, Dana. Matt?
Yep, and thank you all three for the presentation and for the update. When I first dove into the BIFIP, I thought it was a pretty comprehensive and progressive document, especially coming out in 2019. We're ahead of the curve for a lot of reasons. But each year at this annual update, I keep saying, well, it can't get more comprehensive or progressive, but each year it does. And this year is no different for that. I'd like to highlight the fact that you're bringing in new science as this continues to emerge with that. And pathway modeling is going to allow us to understand outcomes of what we're actually doing so we can actually articulate the benefit to the community. And then at some point, we can start associating a dollar in and what that risk reduction will be for a variety of reasons to the built environment, but also to our own infrastructure, which is pretty neat. You're also expanding the analysis. And I know I mentioned it earlier, but I really can't, I guess, strengthen or really can't amplify enough that what you're doing on this bird monitoring component, environmental monitoring post firework, is setting the gold standard for land management as we return back to this. It really is, because we're now understanding now and we're able to articulate to the public that conditions on the mountain currently are not the way nature intended them. And if we do not make a move or we choose inaction as our action, we are going to ask for an issue later on down the road. And the fact that you're returning it back to the way land was before we started taking over, and the fact that the wildlife and plants are responding in a positive manner is something you've been telling us is going to happen for a long time, and backing up with science and being able to put that out there really now is strengthening the message. And you're also bringing in new ways of looking at things. I mean, skinning an acacia tree to see what you're doing, bringing in from international research and then covering it up. Those kind of things continue to impress, I think, myself and hopefully the public as well as we look to manage our lands moving forward. And looking at progress where we're going, you'll hear me say it all the time. It's hard to judge progress in government if you look at yesterday. But if you look at 10 years ago, you see a big difference. And we get closer to the 10-year anniversary of the BIFIP here, we're seeing a big change in what's going on. And the smile on my face when I started seeing burn areas all the way in the northwest corner of our district, just west of Peters Dam, that's the kind of area that's going to start getting real results in terms of risk reduction, in terms of the productivity for our watershed. So I just want to say thank you. Continue to push hard. Continue to bring the prescribed burn components forward. Be first to the trough when Marin County Fire is looking to do things. We want them. They're ready to go. And I can't thank Chief Weber and the Board of Supervisors enough for strengthening the relationship with us to make this move forward. Because I think it's also really important too. You look at these dollar totals, but they are much smaller than where we're spending money throughout the rest of the district. And then we're also asking you to go and find grants to make up big components on that. And then areas that aren't covered by grants, we're asking the public to come and help us as a volunteer to do this. So you're really stretching it here. And we'd like to, especially this next budget cycle, continue to fund areas that you need funding for to really move things. So I look forward to budget presentations as we look for the next rate cycle that are going to be to strengthen the work you're doing. Definitely keep going with the grants, but for right now, I think we have a responsibility to fund this as we can. So please don't be afraid to ask for that. One of the questions I did have on a follow-up is, how's it going, or how's the progress going with the Marin County Prescribed Fire Burn Collaborative? And is that getting any traction? Is there anything we can do to help move that along?
It seems to be a good evolution of just the collaboration that's going on in the county. There was kind of the one TAM entity that worked at the land management side, There's County Fire doing their work, and then you have kind of folks in West Marin on agricultural lands. And so bringing all those groups together, and I think it's just going to continue to mature and help kind of identify priorities for the county for kind of a broad suite of benefits. So, and I think one of the things that mentioned too, the BIFIP is making our watershed more resilient. It's ensuring that we're protecting our source water supply, our assets that are critical for delivering water to the community, and also enhancing kind of the biodiversity of the watershed through mimicking what natural processes would have been occurring with fire on the landscape. And so one of our core goals here is to make sure the mountain is ready for when fire does occur and that it can withstand that impact. So with that, thank you for your support for the BIFIP, and we're happy that we've had such a good year this year.
Great. I wanted to follow up on the budget questions or items, Sean. So the total cost for this year was about 3.6 million. About $1 million or so was covered through grants. How does that compare to what we had budgeted for these activities? Are we short on funds? Are we well within our budget?
Yeah, so internal budget, there was some increase in the budget for the BIFIP. The BIFIP had a goal of kind of 3 million, but we are stepping up to that goal over the last 6 years. So we actually started pretty low. The board in the last capital budget cycle approved more money for the BIFIP to try to get to that 3 million internal funding. We're still a little shy in this particular fiscal year. I don't have the budget book in front of me, but we spent all of our internal funding for the BIFIP. And next year, that number goes up a little bit from the internal mark and gets us closer to that 3 million goal. But we are seeing kind of our BIFIP costs a little bit more than that. So those grant funds are a great kind of supporting mechanism right now. And we have grant funds, I believe, through 2028 is what our current portfolio goes through. And we'll be looking at kind of advancing additional proposals. And we've talked to you about the block grant concept, and we're going to be breaking that down into individual solicitations this year. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
So far, the external funding has allowed us to move forward even when we're in areas where we're exceeding our budget allocation.
Yeah, and I would say that the benefit of the BIFIP being a CEQA project-ready document has allowed the district to, tap into these state funding sources and align with the state priorities to bring resources to Marin County, right? And that has supported not just Marin Water, but we've been kind of the matching funds for some of these grant proposals that have also supported work on state parks and county parks property.
Mm-hmm.
So that collaboration is really key to kind of this work at scale in Marin County, and we need more grant funds to do that, right? State parks has limited resources. Marin County parks and national parks are here as well, and so the ongoing collaboration and tapping into those state funds will still be a priority of OneTAM.
Right, because I wanted to follow on by you clearly have defined annual targets for different activities, but it also seems like that we are appropriately considering an expansion of our targets for prescribed burns. At some point, we'll have to think very carefully about how to support additional activity there. I think we know that there's going to be increasing interest from external funding sources so I think we can be pretty optimistic to be able to bring in the support. But at the same time, I'm wondering at what point do we also, if we are expanding our targets for prescribed burns, it sounds like we are aligning with other efforts in the county. You just spoke to those, but should we have another discussion about what new targets might be based on need as well as available financial support? Just being very clear on what we're aiming for.
Yeah, and we've been thinking about it. Are we stepping up, to bigger targets? And that might be one way to approach this, so that we're not aspirational with big numbers right away. The other thing to consider is we're one land management agency. There's other priorities on those other land management agencies. What's the county's, County Fire's goal for fire, and how do we all fit into that puzzle? So those are things we're going to try to tease out in the next couple of months and as we discuss our addendum.
To share one thing I think about in context of this discussion is this is an area that Sean and his staff have been wildly successful getting outside grants. And it allows us to do this amazing work. And there is a consideration of, with the grant funding, does it allow us to do more, or do we benefit broadly the organization by it takes less pressure off the budget to increase to meet the goals by just continuing to strive, to bring in that outside resources as well. So it's a real balance. And it does, it's at times you're like, boy, is that funding going to continue? But really, Sean has done just amazing work nailing those funds and, even bringing in other than sources than we had in the past. So as long as that continues, and, I think it will, because the interest is certainly there. And the work we're doing is just leading the way for so many in the state and beyond. So the whole thing is really remarkable and so beneficial financially for us, as well as the work that is getting done.
Yeah, I think good work generally as obviously supports additional investment. So as long as we feel like we're making good progress, I think we can also have some confidence that we'll continue to receive co-funding for the efforts. Maybe, I don't know what the right timing is. It sounds like in March you'll be bringing back a discussion around an amendment to cover for CEQA work on burn plans. Maybe that might be a time to also consider what are our targets, what is that going to cost us. It'd be good to get those sort of clarified, I'd say.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll add that to it.
Great. Last point, because one of our stakeholders asked me this the other day and I didn't have a clear answer, is just status of Broome. I know we have a pretty large effort. I think, Carl, you said close to 600 acres under management.
I think under management, it's actually closer to like 1,200.
1,200.
We're not touching every acre every year. And it's a challenging one to describe, are we winning or losing? It's not necessarily the best approach. We have success in areas that we've managed but continue to manage, in terms of reducing the spread, into new areas, and then reducing the amount of the cost per year on any given area that we might be managing.
And in areas where we're not managing, are we seeing significant expansion of Broome, or is it sort of holding steady?
In areas that we don't manage, that we call deferred action, or we're not actively managing them. A good example might be in the Deer Park vicinity. It's almost kind of reached its so dense. It really has nowhere else to grow because it's taken up so much of the available space. But we slowly move and work our way into those areas. Generally, we work on the outside and work our way in, trying to reduce the spread from highly infested areas into new areas. We also focus on habitat types that are most susceptible, such as woodlands. Oak woodlands that have less broom. It's more cost effective to work in those first.
So glass half full, glass half empty.
I think the way to think about it is that we are managing broom. We're not eradicating broom, and we have a perimeter control and a protective measure of making sure that we're not allowing it to invade those sensitive habitats outside of those, deferred action zones. In the BIFIP, there is a kind of 10-year report that will do kind of an updated mapping of the broom areas and then look ahead from there. And that'll be a good time to review where we're at long term.
Okay. And it was a good reminder today that broom is not the only invasive that we're concerned about. There are other things that we have to manage and now put more effort into with the early detection and response plan. Great. Thank you. Any other board comments? Larry, are you there?
I am. I just wanted to say thanks to Carl and to Sean, and great work, and keep it up.
Thank you, Larry. Any other comments from the board? Okay, Terry, can we open it up to public comments, please?
We have 4 speakers. or for public commenters. Larry Menekes, Lyndon Novi, please, the first two.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. And I want to focus on the broom question here, or the broom issue here. If you look at the numbers, spent about 3.6 million this past year. Nearly a million of that, over a quarter of that, went to broom management, not eradication. And pulling broom is really you can't cut it because it comes back worse. The problem with pulling broom is that you upset the seed bank, and the seeds can last for years and years. And so from personal experience, I know when you pull it, what you get is you get a carpet of small broom plants that you then have to go back in at least the third year before they flower and pull them again. So this is an expense that is not going to go away. Now, about 20 years ago, we were looking at the IPM, the Integrated Pest Management Toolbox. And part of that toolbox included the use of herbicides. But there was a very emotional conversation at the time that was not based on science. It was based on fear. And I think we need to go back. We need to look at the use of herbicides in areas where it does not affect waterways. This is what the original plan was 20 or so years ago. And it's still very valid. I think we should dust that off, look at the work that was done in the past, and go perhaps do workshops, do something so that we can eradicate broom properly. And the only way to do it is to bring this back into our toolbox. It's an effective approach. It's the only thing that will really work to reduce broom. And the problem with broom, for people who don't understand, is it creates a monoculture. It changes the chemistry of the soil. All the natives are blocked out, and it's also a high fire danger. So it's really something I hope the board will consider. I know there's people out there that do not want to consider this, but I think if you talk to the environmentalists, you'll get support on this issue. Thank you.
Hi, Linda Novi. I want to support what Larry said. And as a landscape consultant, I've used a product called Burn Out that is industrial strength vinegar that is very effective on the small seedling stage of plants. So that might be a more palatable. I want to congratulate Sean, Carl, and Lauren. A fantastic work. I'm thrilled. I'm so glad I'm here today to hear about it. I'd also like to go on the record as saying Marine Horse Council would be happy to volunteer on projects. So just keep that in mind. We're here for that. I also want to ask, in terms of the BIFIP, are you also studying bat health, populations, et cetera, in terms of your fire and fuel reduction work? I know, Carl, you told me at the RTMP that you have a bat study going on, but where does that fit in? And then lastly, for me personally, I support prescribed fire, and I'm so glad that you are employing that with the understanding that you have to adapt to weather conditions that day, even with the best weather reports. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, Molly, is it okay if we have Sean respond quickly on the bat question?
Sure, I think a brief response on that is appropriate.
So for bats, we have a compliance measure in terms of avoiding certain habitat types for our veg management to ensure we're not impacting habitats. So that is done for all of our projects. The current bat study that is happening is focused on what types of bat species are on the watershed and the habitats they're using. So it's giving us a broad baseline understanding of bats, but kind of on its own and separate than our veg management right now.
Thank you.
We have two more speakers, George Foreman and Laura Sheraton, please. Go ahead, George.
Thank you. I didn't realize I was going to be called on this. I was raising my hand about the recreation management plan. I wasn't sure about the order.
Okay, yes. When it's time for public comment on that item, go ahead and raise your hand then.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Laura Sheraton, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for your work, Sean. And also, I'm My name's Laura Chart and I live in Mill Valley. I've been hiking on the mountain for 50 years. I'm seeing the work in progress almost every other day. I'm concerned about the impacts of the vegetation work and clearing on wildlife. I realize that Point Blue has sponsored the monitoring of bird life, but I'm concerned also about bats, and I appreciate that you're going to have a baseline, but I also want to know what the actual impacts are to bats from the clearing and removal of a lot of trees. And I'm wondering if you will be able to institute a monitoring program for amphibians and reptiles also, because I don't think it's been mentioned. And I wondered if you could give us a count of how many burn piles there are. Also concerned that animals that move into burn piles that are waiting to get treated might not have much of an opportunity to get out, given the circumstances of how you are going to burn. And so if you could maybe answer those, I'd be appreciate it very much. One other thing, we have pokeweed. I live on Panoramic Highway. We have pokeweed coming up everywhere, and people think it's beautiful. And the plants are enormous. They get up to 10 feet high, and 15 feet across. And one plant can make hundreds, if not thousands. So I'm hoping that you maybe can help for the adjacent to the parklands, that you make an awareness, help raise awareness. Thanks.
Thank you.
Tara, I'm just going to note again that generally we do follow up subsequently to these meetings to lengthier questions. So
That's
we'll be
correct.
doing so in this case.
Okay. Next speaker, Nona Dennis, please.
Hi, thanks very much. Wonderful, informative morning listening to how the BIFIP is being used, not only used now, but also being expanded to address the sort of stepping up of prescribed burning. I have one question about the contract with Point Blue and how it differentiates between the typical ongoing land bird monitoring and the apparently new understory response. Is that a response? Does that relate mainly to the prescribed burning initiatives, or how does that differ from the ongoing land bird monitoring? We've often brought up the issue, not just I, but others, um, about how the burn piles, Laura just mentioned this, for example, the burn piles themselves, as they said, become habitats for small creatures. And so it's the focus of the understory that is of interest. I'm curious about that.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. We'll have staff look into your questions and get back to you.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful presentation, Sean. Thanks very much. And Carl. Ryan.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
All right. Thanks, Terry. We'll move on then. Next is a review of our fiscal year 2025 volunteer and community engagement programs. For those that have not participated in our volunteer programs, you may not appreciate how much our community contributes beyond our watershed fees to caring for our natural resources. But having done some of these now, I know it takes a really good manager to keep these efforts organized and actually productive. So welcome, Suzanne, for the update.
So this next item is an update on our volunteer program. We'll provide an overview of the program offerings we have and what's been done over the last year. And so to do that, we have Suzanne Whelan, our volunteer program coordinator. So I'll hand it to her to provide this presentation.
Your mic.
There we go. Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm the volunteer coordinator and an ecologist for the Water District, and excited to be here to talk about how our volunteers and our community members and our AmeriCorps fellows take care of the mountain. And we're going to talk a bit about the highlights of the past fiscal year, ending in June 2025. And we'll also speak a little bit about the future direction that the programs are taking. Okay, thank you. So this slide, we have our programs organized under 4 titles. This goes according to our work plan, and it's also one of the ways that we can advertise these programs to the public. So you can see from improving trail corridors to doing restoration of ecosystems and protecting invasive or protecting endangered species. We have a wide variety of programs that are available so that they can match the wide variety of interests and skills and time commitment that volunteers have. We also invest a lot in community outreach that help the public understand the work that we're doing on the mountain. But the vast majority of our programs are service-oriented, which means people are doing hands-on land stewardship that directly benefits the watershed. And what we're really trying to do is connect as many people as possible to climate solutions. And a big part of creating solutions is creating these community connections. There we go. So we just heard about the BIFIP, and the Marin Water Volunteer and Outreach programs support multiple plans and try to advance these plans by using volunteers. So with the BIFIP, we also take into account the Marin Regional Forest Health Strategy. We also have a Lagunitas Creek Stewardship Plan, and we are just undertaking the update of the Road and Trails Management Plan. So with the BIFIP, we are trying to reduce fuel loads and encourage biodiversity. Volunteers have a huge part in this, and when we have events like the Bald Hill Broom Bust, we have volunteers who literally are expanding the fuel break with their own hands. In Lagunitas Creek, our stewardship plan calls for enhancement of streamside restoration, and that is something that we are undertaking. And in order to get more buy-in from the community, we offer public programming, such as we have a Coho holiday walk that was supposed to happen next week, but we're expecting too much rain, so we've moved it to January. Our AmeriCorps fellows of the past 3 years, they were Grizzly Corps fellows, they did a lot to advance the outreach about prescribed fire as we, increased our capacity for that. They did a great job of creating some self-guided tours on the mountain and leading tours on site again to sometimes, explain some of these more complicated topics. And then we've just come out of the recreation management feasibility study, which is getting us now early into the process of the the Road and Trail Management Plan update, RTMP. And this updated document is going to give us guidance on how to balance visitor access and natural resource management. So by inviting the public to be involved in the process, we're allowing folks to have more of an investment in our natural resource work.
And I'll just note briefly that these plans are important for the district to kind of achieve its core mission in different ways. And our volunteer program supports all of them and supports connecting people to the watershed as its drinking water source and making that kind of core to kind of all of our offerings and understandings around why we have these kind of public lands open to the public and the unique role that provides the district or allows the district to play within the community. So with that, we'll keep going.
Thanks. So volunteers are at the heart of a lot of what we do on the watershed. They extend our capacity, they bring in community knowledge, and they help us build these long-term connections with the land and with each other. So from pulling broom to talking to visitors, there are ambassadors and there are hands in the field. So habitat restoration, of course, is one of our core focus areas with volunteers. And over the past fiscal year, we had almost 400 volunteers over 10 events, about 1,200 hours of restoration on the ground. We also have a few stalwart independent volunteers that did about another 165 hours doing independent work, doing early detection and rapid response. And as you know, ecological restoration, we're promoting biodiversity and help be more prepared for wildfires. So trail stewardship, enhanced trail stewardship was something that was identified when we were doing the recreation management plan feasibility study. So in response, the district has partnered with Redwood Trails Alliance, or RTA, and now we have a dedicated trails coordinator. And she is working closely with the watershed maintenance staff. She is managing, she's supervising contractors, and she is helping us run volunteer programs. So over this past year, we had about 700 hours of trail stewardship on the mountain over 12 events. 5 of these events were related to the Liberty Gulch Trail, which is part of the Azalea Hill, rehab area, or was working on preparations for the bike pilot project. We also, under trail stewardship, talk about litter abatement, and we still have a few folks that take it upon themselves to do litter abatement in like high use areas. And we also had one school group that came out this year and did that. So our community science programs, they take a really good look at our wildlife on the mountain. And this year we had 15 frog docents who spoke with almost 500 visitors at Carson Falls. So at Little Carson Falls, we have an endangered sensitive species called the foothill yellow-legged frogs, and those docents are out there talking to people about that species and how they can protect the habitat out there. We also have turtle observers. This year we had 28 of those volunteers spending 75 hours looking for the non-native and the native turtles in our district reservoirs. So with the mammals, we have the Wildlife Picture Index. That's the scientific name of the project, but it's called the Marin Wildlife Watch, spearheaded by OneTam. And this past year, there's a cohort of 21 volunteers, and they cataloged 480,000 photos, which is a record. And then that's also the first time we've been able to get caught up with cataloging these photos since before the pandemic. Bees. So we are still, we're at the forefront of science with protecting our native pollinators. And with bees, we have volunteers who are partaking in the California Bumblebee Atlas, and they're taking and recording observations of bumblebees on watershed lands and beyond. And then also this past year, we piloted a unique community science process in that we're trying to understand the habitat preferences for the San Francisco leafcutter bee, which is that rare bee that was rediscovered last year on our lands. So the district also, we invest heavily in the youth of Marin. And this past year, we had 23 events, either field trips or classroom presentations, engaging about 500 people. And that was mostly high school and college students. We also support the Trout in the Classroom program. And this past year, we had 49 classrooms who come up to Bontempi to release their trout as the culmination of that project. The Watershed Efficiency Department, they also have a robust schools programming, but that's not reflected in here. So outreach into the community, we've talked to thousands of people this past year. And 17 of those events were focused on forest health and the use of beneficial fire. It's talking to about 900 people. And then we had another 16 events that could range from, fishing with a ranger to an archaeological hike. And we engaged another 800 folks. So that could be either people coming to the watershed or us going out into the community and, tabling at events. So community engagement, we manage multi-agency collaboration with one TAM to provide important public outreach materials and activities, especially on our beneficial fire and forest health. And that all supports the BIFIP and the forest health strategy. So we've engaged, thousands of folks on that. And so maybe this past year you were out here and you learned a bit about our native bees when you went to the Marin County Fair, and we had a pollinator set up and we partnered with the library, and we had dissecting scopes and live bee, or not live, dead bee specimens at the library. We also have engagement using the TAM van. So we had a few like nature journaling activities. And then, of course, we continue to do guided hikes with a variety of topics, not just prescribed burns. And one of the other cool things we did this past year is we did a few bio blitzes out by the Rock Spring area looking for fire following plants and lichen, and that was last fall. So AmeriCorps. AmeriCorps partnerships multiply our capacity. For the past 3 years, we had Grizzly Corps, which is a partnership with UC Berkeley, and their focus was forest health and prescribed fire, and they really helped us amp up that message. And then this year, we have 3 AmeriCorps from the California Climate Action Corps, which are CCAC, and their focus is fire ecology, forest health, and climate solutions. So we've also had the pleasure of having 2 AmeriCorps for the past 15 years with the Watershed Stewards Program, and their focus is on fisheries, restoration, conservation, and outreach. So our AmeriCorps help us run events, recruit volunteers, support biological monitoring, and they really are good at telling the story of the watershed to the public. They have a great enthusiasm and passion for community science, for environmental justice, and just, outdoor recreation that is really infectious when you spend time with them. So this past year, our volunteers, partners, and community members, made a lot of meaningful impacts on the watershed. And you can see here represented our community partners, and they represent a network of shared stewardship. So these are folks that show up, learn, adapt, and continually, give back to the mountain. And looking ahead now, as we're updating the roads and trails management plan, we've heard, resoundingly that people really want to invest more time in trail stewardship. So with the help of RTA, we have our biggest suite of trail programs lined up already. And those focuses will be on infrastructure like repairing bridges and stairs, improving tread work, which helps erosion control, and just, vegetation management that's been deferred. So we are also excited about our new CCAC partnership. And like I said, we have 3 members from that group. In the past few months, they've already been part of a prescribed burn. They've launched a series of guided hikes, and they have created a mentorship program for high schools. So all of that points to a shared future of, continued action where we and the community members are going to protect our water resources. We're going to encourage biodiversity. And by connecting people in the watershed, we just have a more resilient community and mountain. So thank you for listening, and I'll take any questions.
Thanks a lot, Suzanne. Start board discussion. Diana, want to kick it off?
I know we have a lot to cover, so I'm just not going to ask anything. I'm just going to say that it's really appreciated, and it's just really heartening to see that our community is so involved and cares so much about this incredible place we live. So, and thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you, Diana. Jed.
Yeah, thanks for the report. For some reason, I thought Sean had skipped it earlier and that we weren't doing it. I was like, wait a minute. I'm curious, just over time, it's always good to see trends. And are you seeing more volunteers than you have in the past? Do you have enough resources to help leverage this tremendous effort that you're doing in community? How can we help be more supportive? And lastly, what have you learned from other agencies that have similar kinds of work and some of our partners, and how do you implement that?
So yeah, I have all the numbers from all the years, and they change depending on, frankly, like staff capacity, AmeriCorps, partnerships. Like when we started with One TAM, I had like a whole team of interns, and then also just what are our goals for the year. So, but it's always steady. I have a really amazing job that we have a community that really wants to get involved. So keeping them involved with fresh programs is fun. And yeah, I mean, the pandemic, of course, lessened things, and people came back with a vengeance. So it's great. And having 3 AmeriCorps this year is really increasing our capacity. The past 3 years, I've had one AmeriCorps. So this is a newish program that's California based, this AmeriCorps program. And then as far as working with partners, yeah, we collaborate with Marin County Parks a lot, and that's with our community science projects, with our frog docents and our turtle docents. So that's something we started a dozen or so years ago, and then they've came on and have a similar program using the protocols that we have, and then also sharing volunteers. And then with that, like, they have a wildflower docent program that was kind of based around what we've been doing. So we had a small gathering last year that celebrated those docents together, and it was really heartening to see like the plant people and the animal people together and talking about wildlife and plant monitoring. That was pretty cool. Yeah, so I mean, really, it's for my professional work, working with the One TAM, and then even going beyond with, like, say, Together Bay Area, to see how folks are taking land management and that folks have an appetite for understanding prescribed burn at the same time has been can really advance what we're trying to do. And then, yeah, RTA, that's a newish partnership as well. So, having the trail coordinator, who was actually employed with us a year prior as a seasonal, and then she came back. She, before that, was a 2-year CCAC. No, not CCAC. CCC, California Conservation Corps, which is another AmeriCorps program. She did 2 years of that. So seeing how people move up in their professional lives and then, come back and increase, the efficiency of what we're doing is it's really thrilling to see that. Yeah.
And I'll just note, I think there's one thing to flag for the board is that there's a lot of focus at the state level on in terms of stewardship and what that means and how stewardship can help kind of meet the state goals around restoration and protection of, biodiversity and implementation of things like prescribed fire and forest restoration projects. And you see that happening in terms of like co-learning and advocacy and through organizations like the California Landscape Stewardship Network, which is like the one TAM of the state, all these kind of regional networks coming together. The district also, as Suzanne mentioned, is participating in a member agency of Together Bay Area, which is kind of a regional coalition that thinks through partnerships and kind of co-learning around how to implement stewardship in the Bay Area. And recently, Together has become the kind of hosting organization for the Golden Gate Biosphere Network. And so that's kind of a one that's been out there and hasn't found a lot of grounding and is now going to be supported by Together, where a lot of our local agencies collaborate there. And then at the more local mountain level, we have our One TAM collaboration where there's a lot of co-learning going on.
Great. Matt.
Thank you. And I think a big thank you to our volunteers as well. And Suzanne, when I see these slides, all I think is like, you're a cat herder because of how much it takes. And so just want to acknowledge the steps you go to, because I've been to some of these events. Our children have benefited from some of your actions. So it's been really neat to see. One of the questions, has it been tough to get access to triple Cs and all these groups, or is there a need that's not being met?
Yeah, so we have ongoing partnerships with California Conservation Corps North Bay, as well as California Conservation Corps. And those are kind of separate contracts that we set up on an annual basis. In the previous presentation in the BIFIP annual report, Lauren breaks down, we had a grant of about 300,000 that was just core hours that was dedicated to the district for implementing our prescribed or our forest restoration and other veg management. Not a grant that we see in dollars, but actually just goes directly to the state agencies. We're like a host site, and they partner with us to do those projects. So we see the benefit coming from the state through the CCCs doing work on our land. And we also set up individual contracts for them to support things like construction of Azalea Hill and other trail type projects.
But in terms of availability of the workforce, we're not seeing anything right now.
Yeah, no, we have been successful making sure on a given year, like if there's a fire or an event that the Ukiah CCC is deployed to, we do have kind of periods of time where we can't access them, but it hasn't impacted our work.
Okay, great. And then are there areas of all the volunteer, I guess, components that you talked about earlier that you're seeing a deficiency or we could use more help in?
I'd say I'd say like the docent programs are the ones that you have to put the most effort in. There's like that front loading of training folks and then trying to like hold on to them because they have such a high level of knowledge, and then like access because they're out there being ambassadors. So that's always something that I wish I could just focus more on to get quality folks and hold on to those folks. But as far as those like Saturday drop-in trail crew and habitat restoration, it's been great. It goes through fluxes, but there's with social media and our improved like communications team, like lots of people know about it, and it's not just Marin folks. People come from all over the Bay Area because Mount Tam is such a highlight. And so yeah, we have a good. I mean, I can always take more people, but.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you for that insight. And lastly, I just want to piggyback on the comments from earlier about groups stepping up to wanting to volunteer in certain areas, most recently around trail stewardship, trail repair, and work like that. Just want to encourage that we can actually facilitate as much as we can for that, because I think the community is ready to continue working. You see it all the time. So appreciate your leadership in that.
Yeah, thanks. We've been able to, with the increased like partnerships and AmeriCorps, we've been able to be adding more like weekday stewardship events as of late, which is great.
Thanks, Matt. Larry, questions or
Yeah.
comments?
Well, I have a comment. I wanted to again thank you and your excellent choice of people, Sean. I was unaware we had a turtle docent, but I think it would be nice if you could bring the docents in to meet the board at some point in time. I think that would be an interesting addition to one of these meetings, to have just a short presentation by what they do and what successes have occurred. And thank
Sure,
you
we
all.
have and we also have a short report that we put out every year on the frog docent and the turtle observer program. So that has more details and numbers.
Thank you, Larry. Suzanne, I think you've responded to questions on availability of volunteers as well as our capacities to manage all of the additional help. And you also noted in our next presentation, we're going to be talking about our road and trail management plan update, which will likely also require, additional consideration of trail stewardship, which we've already been touching on. Do we have any internal capacity limitations in our ability to work with more volunteers or more external support with respect to trail stewardship? Is there anything we need to be thinking about as our trail programs evolve?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's limiting factors, like there's only so many Saturdays in a month. And, we have lots of events. So in the spring, sometimes we have to double down on 2 events on a Saturday if I have enough, staff in AmeriCorps to cover it. So that's one limiting factor. Habitat restoration can be great because you can have a dozen people, or depending on the site, I could have 100 people, volunteers. Trail stewardship is a bit more nuanced, and you have to have a higher staff to volunteer ratio because of safety concerns, just the technical, and then also just line of sight. Like you lose the volunteers around the corner, whereas when you're pulling broom, you can see everybody. So there's some limiting factors there, and so by design, a lot of times our trail days we keep them under 20 people, volunteers.
And why only Saturdays?
That's when people have off.
And we do offer weekday events, and we do kind of like corporate events, or, people that come with a group that want to do a project. We'll, accommodate those on the weekdays when they're available. So that is an offering that we provide. One of the things we've been doing as part of our, expansion of our trail stewardship work is also doing an inventory of projects, which is critical. There's also a level of compliance that we want to be mindful of, right? Like, more people is great, but more people can have more impact, right? And more unskilled people doing work in sensitive areas can have a very real impact. So we want to be very cautious about like how we deploy volunteers to do this work. And we want to make sure that we have scouted, identified, and done the compliance to support the work that needs to be done to protect the resource as well as improve the access opportunities. So there's a balance of all of this, right?
Right.
And yeah, there are opportunities as we go into the roads and trails plan update that we'll speak to in the next presentation around, as we identify, future goals of that plan, we'll be able to kind of outline a strong need for volunteer support to implement it, right?
Yeah.
And I would just be mindful, right? Volunteers support our broom management, but as you saw in that presentation, Lauren's coordinating 600 acres of broom management by contractors. And, there's a difference of scale at times as well to be mindful of.
No, I think we all appreciate how thoughtful we have to be in managing these activities and a range of different volunteers from different organizations. But at the same time, I think just repeating what you said, Sean, as we get into the next presentation and down the road with the RTMP update, as we have a better understanding of what the maintenance requirements are going to be, how much that's going to be costing us, being creative on meeting those needs will also, I think, be important. So I hope we can continue, to evaluate all of our options in a thoughtful way. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll open it up for public comments, please, Terry.
Yes, Vernon Huffman and then Nona Dennis.
Good morning. Brennan Huffman, Access for Bikes, Marin Trail Stewards now. Just wanted to set the record straight. I believe acknowledgement's important and setting the record straight's important. And the slide that acknowledged the partners, uh, it hurt to not see our organization there or MCBC's organization there. I put in a lot of hours on Liberty Gulch Trail, and my organization put in a lot of hours. There's a crib wall that we built from ground up with big boulders that we had to move with wheelbarrows, one-wheeled, non-powered wheelbarrows. We worked for 2 days to build that crib wall. And this was before RTA was established, before your contract with RTA. They weren't involved in Liberty Gulch while we were there. As far as I know, they weren't involved with Liberty Gulch at all. That was Access for Bikes. And when those volunteers days happened, the days I was there, I counted 12 out of 13 volunteers were mountain bikers with Access for Bikes. So when it comes to the next item today, we're here to tell you we're going to show up and we're going to make sure that these trails are sustainable as we did with Liberty Gulch and as we did with the pilot trails that we showed up for. That was really fun too, to show up and help bring those pilot trails proposed that didn't happen, unfortunately, but bring those up to a higher standard of care. It was really fun to do. And again, sure wish MCBC and Access for Bikes would have been on that slide. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Dennis, please.
Yeah, I guess in a similar vein with Vernon, that doesn't happen often, but I looked at that slide of volunteers and I said, where are the 12 years, roughly 12 years, that Trail Partners Marin, Safe Trails Marin, otherwise known as Slow and Say Hello, does not appear because we have volunteered, really using a couple of handfuls of volunteers. You may get 700 hours of people who really, really want to do stewardship trail maintenance, but it's very, very hard to get volunteers who want to come out and spend a morning on Saturday reminding people that Slow and Say Hello, that that everything really rests on behaviors of people. Now, this may be more suitable for the next presentation, but it does fall under volunteers. And that is that this small group, the collaboration of MCBC and Marine Conservation League and Marine Horse Council, has been sort of at it with a lot of cooperation and support from the Water District, but so much we say a scarcity of people to actually do it. We will be coming to you after later in January with a proposal which has been really very carefully detailed with the help of Larry, with the help of and working together with MCBC, Krista and Marine Horse Council, Linda Novi and others, to find a way to be integrated into your volunteer program, to be actually embraced, not just appreciated, but embraced. Because what we do is to address that component of success, which really rests in behaviors. Nothing I have seen so far this morning really deals with the behaviors of people who ordinarily are out there in the millions, enjoying not just recreation, but also enjoying a whole host, enjoying being volunteers, and indeed. So behaviors, I think it's probably Larry Russell who once said that the difference between a bike and an e-bike is largely in the brain and the behavior of the person who's riding it. And I'm not focusing this on bikes. I'm really talking about everyone who enjoys using the Water District. Behavior is key. And our two messages are stay on the trail, which protects resources, and slow and say hello and acknowledge other people who are on the trail. It's behavior ridden and behavior intensive. Behaviors you have to address in your volunteer program in some manner as ambassadors, people to remind those who are enjoying themselves that they have responsibility to protect the resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no further speakers.
All right. Thanks everyone for the comments. Suzanne, thanks again for the update.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it. And we'll move on to the next item, which is the progress report on our road and trails management plan update.
The next item is an update on our recreation roads and trails management plan and the community workshop that the district hosted in November. So I'm joined with Carly, our environmental planner, and Adam from Ascent, our consultant that's supporting the district in updating the RTMP and coordinating and facilitating our community workshops and community input. So the presentation that we put together for you, we're going to highlight, just for background purposes, the Roads and Trails Management Plan, what it is, the compliance that goes with it, talk about the planning workshop and open house that the district hosted, which is a great format and engaged about 160 plus people on a Sunday and Monday. We're going to talk through the community input that we received at that workshop and start to show you how we're organizing it to inform the updates that we're proposing to move forward with. And then we'll discuss next steps. So I'm going to hand it over to Carly and she'll walk us through.
Good morning, Carly Blanchard, Environmental Planner. The Mount Tamalpais Watershed Roads and Trails Management Plan, or Plan RTMP, was adopted in 2005. It has guided how the district manages and maintains over 150 miles of roads and trail network on its watershed. And it had three primary goals focused on improving water quality, protecting sensitive habitats and special status plants and animals, and keeping the watershed's natural ecological functioning. The RTMP was built out of some key elements, including road and trail design standards, classification, work plan guidelines, best management practices, and environmental measures, as well as signage, public information, and outreach. Accompanying the plan was also a program environmental impact report. This EIR, or environmental impact report, was completed under CEQA to identify any impacts the plan would have, as well as address and define mitigation measures to reduce or avoid those impacts. The plan's been successful in guiding the district over the past 25 years, but it is due for an update to reflect current conditions and the evolving needs on the watershed. So staff has began to update and start to consider the different key areas to investigate. We'll start with restoration and stewardship. We'll look to identify high priority areas for preserving and enhancing habitat and biodiversity, evaluating opportunities for habitat restoration on and adjacent to roads and trails, as well as update criteria for social trail management and stewardship. We'll also be looking to update any sections focused on visitor engagement and outreach to consider incorporating trail safety and visitor use management, trail stewardship and environmental education, and visitor outreach and management. Thinking more about the roads and trails, we'll also be updating classifications, designations, and standards, considering road and trail network in relation to visitor interest, evaluating bike trail options, and exploring design standards and environmental protection measures for single and multi-use. Throughout the plan, we'll also be incorporating additional monitoring and adaptive management. And it's also important to note that in the 2005 plan, work plan guidelines were defined, but a comprehensive work plan was not. And staff is proposing as part of this update to create that comprehensive work plan, looking at the next 10 to 20 years of priorities for work on the watershed. And now I'll pass it over to Adam. Thank you.
All right, good morning. Adam Lewandowski. I'm the Conservation and Recreation Planning Director at Ascent, and I'm leading the consultant team supporting the district with the Road and Trail Management Plan update. The graphic on the screen here shows the overall planning and CEQA process for the Road and Trail Management Plan update. The public engagement tasks or steps are shown in the green boxes in the bottom. And really the public engagement, the community involvement's an integral part of the planning process. We have this process set up so that at each public engagement step, the community has an opportunity to review new information, to see how their input on the previous step inform progress on the RTMP, and also to provide input that directly informs the next steps in the planning process. We're starting with really trying to understand the priorities and the issues that need to be addressed in the road and trail management plan. So that step included the community workshops that Sean mentioned in November. It includes this meeting today, as well as a series of upcoming community site walks where we'll get out with the community to walk some of the trails, see the issues firsthand, be able to talk about their concerns and possible solutions out in the watershed. We'll consider all that input, and then we will go back and do some analysis and conduct some evaluation of the trail conditions, of the resource conditions, then develop a set of preliminary recommendations and a set of trail scenarios that provide alternative options for how the trails could be managed. We'll bring that information back in the spring to get feedback from this committee and from the community at another community workshop. And then take that feedback to develop the draft road and trail management plan. And that'll be ready in the summer or late fall. That'll come back again for community review and committee review at the end of the summer. And then we'll take that feedback on the draft plan and then move into the CEQA process. And that'll involve preparing the draft CEQA document that would then be released for a formal public review period where there'd be an additional community workshop and a board or committee meeting. And then we'd respond to those comments, prepare the final CEQA document, and then bring that back to the board for possible adoption. Next slide.
Adam, before you move on, just first, welcome to the meeting. Great to have you here. Also, I noted that the dates start to drop off your slide once we get to the draft CEQA. I'm assuming because there's more uncertainty there, but do you have any general guidelines on how how the process will, how long it'll take following the feedback on the RTMP that will occur next summer or fall?
Yeah, it really depends on what ends up in the road and trail management plan and the feedback that we get on that road and trail management plan. We'll be meeting internally and with council here at the beginning of January to really kind of map out that CEQA process. A general guideline that you hear is, it takes about a year for an EIR from start to finish. We may be able to shorten that because we are doing a lot of environmental analysis to inform the plan itself as well as the CEQA analysis. But you're right, there's a fair amount of uncertainty about the CEQA process and timeline at this point. But we can certainly provide more detail on that schedule as we get a little further along.
Okay, and just a little niggle. We're really focusing on an update to an existing RTMP. We're not recreating the RTMP, right? That's an important distinction, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Important distinction, and there's a lot of steps that we want to get community input in, at the front end that'll kind of drive where we go. And we're still kind of reviewing what that environmental review will fully look like as we update the plan.
Right. And then, as Sean mentioned, the district did host a 2-day community workshop, November 9th and 10th. This was out at the Sky Oaks Ranger Station. And the workshop was really intended to inform the community about the RTMP update, some of the issues and the topics that can be addressed, and also to hear from the community to understand their priorities, their concerns, and really get people thinking about possible solutions to road and trail management in the watershed. It was an open house format that was organized around 3 different topic stations. So the first station focused in on goals for the RTMP update and criteria for managing social trails. The second station was focused on stewardship and outreach. And then the third station was focused on the trail standards and management and classifications. As Sean mentioned, we had about 160 attendees in total across the 2 days. And the attendees kind of reflected the range of different users that we see on the watershed. So there were bicyclists, hikers, equestrians, environmental advocates, local families that all engaged in the workshop. So for the next portion of the presentation, we'd like to walk through each of those major topics that were discussed at the workshop. And we'll summarize the input that we heard from the community and then discuss how that input can inform the next steps in the RTMP update. So we'll start with the goals for the RTMP. And this slide shows the existing goals from the 2005 RTMP. We shared these with community members at the workshop, and then we asked them to think about what's missing or what do they think is needed for the RTMP update, and to actually we ask community members to write goals that they feel like should be included into the RTMP update. So really a good opportunity for them to share, their perspectives on future priorities. It was a really great opportunity to get people thinking about what are those key issues and opportunities with trail management, and how can we better manage the roads and trails in the watershed. So we did receive a wide range of different goals from community members, but the vast majority of those suggested goals addressed one of the topics or one or more of the topics that are shown on the screen. So there's a lot of suggested goals about improving trail sustainability and maintenance, a lot of support for maintaining that strong focus on environmental protection and water quality. A number of community members provided goals focused on safety or reducing conflict between different user groups, or even separating different types of uses on different trails. A number of goals focused on creating a more connected trail network and managing social trails, as well as a lot of interest in clear rules for trail users and consistent enforcement of those rules. There were a number of goals kind of centered around providing fair and equitable access to different types of trail users, as well as some that were very specific about providing expanded access for mountain biking on single track trails. And then goals related to providing more opportunities for community involvement and stewardship, as well as providing for that variety of different trail experiences for the different user groups and the different members of the community that may be seeking different experiences on the trails. So that exercise provides some great initial input that can really kind of help shape the direction of the Road and Trail Management Plan update. And after reviewing that feedback, we have some preliminary recommendations. We think it's important to retain those goals from the 2005 RTMP. There could be some minor edits or reorganization, but really want to keep the intent of those goals to protect water quality, to protect habitat and biological resources, and to minimize any impacts of the road and trail system on the ecological function of the watershed. But we also recommend creating 3 or more new goals that address some of those issues that were brought up by community members. So that could include a goal kind of centered around fostering community involvement in stewardship programs that support responsible recreation and watershed protection. We could include a new goal focused on providing access opportunities that meet the different needs of different watershed users and respect community values. And we could also include a new goal related to preserving visitor safety, which could include things like trail design, as well as proactive education, signage, outreach, and other community-supported etiquette.
So, Adam, excuse me, just a process question now. So you've suggested these new goals that emerged out of the community discussion. Do we still have to then formally take decisions on these, or do you start to build this into the planning or the update?
Yeah, so these are just concepts at this point from the input received. You'll see at kind of the next watershed committee update, kind of the formal kind of concepts that have been developed based on our ongoing work, that we start to roll into that draft RTMP. The draft RTMP will be the time when you see it kind of in a hard form, but if you want to help shape any of it, that's the point of the watershed committee discussions.
Including
inviting comments, absolutely, and
Okay.
any thoughts you may have on this.
I'm sorry, throwing out the thought if we could comment by section might be a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think there's going to be quite a bit here. So does this feel like a good place to stop and talk a little bit about the goals for the update?
I think so.
Great. Matt, do you want to?
Sure. I think, one, Adam, again, welcome as well, and thank you for your assistance in this project. And one of the things I continue to hear is that up to this point, all the actions taken so far have lacked or been deficient in community engagement or the ability for a community member to be able to express his or her concern in this process. So I think for me, a hard stop if we can't meet that expectation moving forward. And the way you've laid it out, I believe, is a responsible way of doing it, starting off with 16 hours of community engagement right off the bat. And so for the folks that are interested in inputting in this project, this is the time to do so. Because when it gets to the final and we get towards moving things forward, it's too late. And so this is the opportunity to do so. People up to this point, through various iterations, have come and given their engagement only to get at the very end submarined by groups that say that they haven't had the same opportunity to make the engagement. And this process, I believe, lays out an equitable way to do so. So thank you. I encourage that. And I also think that the goals that you mentioned in terms of the 3 additions, those 3 capture, I think, 3 different qualities that we had before, but I think they support moving forward in responsible ways we look to evaluate the new RTMP update.
Thanks, Matt. Diana? Sure. Yeah. Jed, any thoughts on the developing goals?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. They're very different than the existing, so I guess there's a reason for that. I'd suggest you simplify it, maybe combine them, and with the focus on at least the first 2, it's about community involvement and input. Proving that we're a listening organization and formalizing that, I think, would be really important. The safety component and education component, I'd say, are separate. So so maybe this can be knocked down to 2. Thank you. That's great. Very thoughtful.
If I could, Sean, for clarification, the existing goals, are these just capturing the topic, or is this a full goal? Because it does look very different on the screen.
Yeah, so we're saying that the water quality, biological, ecological, those are themes that were in the 3 goals that are part of our existing RTMP. And so our idea is we can probably, bring those into 2 goals, I think, at the end of the day. So we're just saying we're going to maintain those themes that were in those original goals, but we might rewrite them. Yeah. That's our intention. And then with regard to the new goals, I just want to note that one of the things that we identified as kind of lacking in our current goals of our RTMP is that really kind of people are coming to the watershed. That's why we have roads and trails. So let's start thinking about them and integrate them into our goals for our plan. Cool.
Thanks, Sean. Larry, any comments or questions regarding these preliminary goals that are emerging out of the community discussions?
Well, I don't have too many comments about that part at this point in time, but I do have comments about it's nice to know that the work we did in 2005 is still holding up and still useful. A lot of effort was put into this document at that time, and I'm glad to see that it's reflecting that it's still working 20 years later.
Thanks, Larry. That's a good reminder. Yeah, and I think, I'll just, the main themes that have come out, I think they do seem to reflect everything that I've heard regarding a real community interest in stewardship and being part of our watershed management, managing the different recreation needs or opportunities that community members are interested in, and visitor safety. So those 3 general concepts, I think, are reflected here. So I find that encouraging. Sorry, Diana.
No, it's okay. Thanks for letting me gather my thoughts. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I just wanted to say how much I appreciated all the detail on how you did these workshops. It was because I was wondering how we were going to get the input and how we were going to translate that. And it was really interesting to see, like, I zoomed in on a lot of these if people weren't at the workshops, was it just board meetings? Did people reach out to you individually? How do you feel like you got your arms around kind of the greater sense of what goals are, not just people who might have showed up at workshops and stuff?
Yeah, so let's start with this is, early input into the RTMP update process. Secondarily, let's start we're building off of something that happened for 2 years plus. That was our recreation management feasibility study, which was comprehensive in the number of community members that attended the various workshops. We also are building off of about 2 years of an e-bike community advisory committee that was formed and provided early input. So this is all building off of all of that engagement.
Yeah,
right.
Great points.
And so in the feasibility study, we developed an email list that was everybody that engaged in any of those workshops. and our communications department has retained that. We have a website that tells everyone all of these iterations of these planning processes is available for review, and you can sign up for an email list there that is that same email body. That email list was, sent out so that folks knew there was an opportunity to engage at this early step. We got this input. We're getting input from you all. We'll start to develop kind of draft goals, if you will, and then there will be another opportunity that we're going to connect that we'll speak to later in the presentation around next community engagement opportunities. So we're seeing this as very iterative to try to bring as many folks along as we can.
Great. I just want to avoid us having comments that we didn't include everybody. So thank you.
All right. Well, the next topic that was addressed at the workshop are the management of social trails and the criteria for how we prioritize different actions related to the social trails. So next slide, please.
Can you please define social trails?
Yeah, sure. So social trails are also known as non-system routes. So these are user-created trails generally that are not formally maintained by the district. They're not shown on the trail maps. It's really kind of people going out there and wanting to get to a point or wanting to, connect between two different trails and really creating their own trail. We shared some of the criteria from the 2005 RTMP about prioritizing closure and restoration of social trails. And then we asked participants to participate in this sticky dot exercise to let us know what criteria they think are most important for selecting which social trails should be the highest priority for closure and restoration, and which social trails could potentially be considered for adoption as part of the formal trail system. And don't worry if you can't read all the text on here. This is a kind of an image of that sticky dot exercise, but I'll go through all of the different criteria here in the next two slides. So this chart shows the feedback from workshop participants on what they felt were the most important criteria for determining which social trails should be closed and restored. And you'll see the most common responses are in the bold text there. So a lot of support for closing and restoring social trails that protect wildlife habitat or reduce habitat fragmentation, as well as support for restoring social trails near waterways or that have water quality impacts or that have erosion issues, as well as support for restoring those social trails that are in sensitive plant habitats or serpentine soils. And so really the common thread in these responses is that community members felt like it was most important to prioritize restoration based on the habitat and the water quality benefits that could be achieved through that social trail restoration, rather than looking at other criteria like how recently the social trail was created or how many people are using that trail. Next slide. So this is the same kind of feedback, but this relates to community preferences on criteria for which social trails should be considered for potential adoption into the formal trail system. So they'd show up on the maps, they'd be maintained by the district. And about 42% of the responses recommended adopting those social trails that provide desired trail experiences. So that could be a social trail that has a really desirable kind of bike experience, or that provides a unique access to a viewpoint or some other kind of unique experience for hikers or equestrians that aren't really provided by other system trails. And then another 28% of the responses recommended adopting social trails that provide strategic connections between existing trails within the watershed, to really kind of provide that more seamless and integrated trail system, to provide more opportunities for people to create loops and to get to where they want to go. So as we evaluate the social trails, we can consider the trail connectivity and the experience provided by those individual trails, as well as the water quality and habitat impacts. So based on that community input and the previous work to date, we've identified some preliminary priorities for how the RTMP update can address social trails. And really at a high level, we need to ensure that the RTMP update supports the district's overall mission to provide clean drinking water and sound environmental stewardship of the watershed. And so as we look at the combined effects of any changes to the road and trail system, we want to ensure that there's a net environmental benefit from implementing the RTMP update. And that environmental benefit can be achieved partly through a proactive campaign to close and restore those social trails that have the greatest water quality or habitat impacts. And that could happen in tandem with the potential adoption and maintenance of those more sustainable social trails that provide important connections or experiences. But we'd look at this as a whole in the approach for managing social trails to make sure that we're balancing any new public access with restoration to achieve that overall net environmental benefit. We'd also want to include strategies to monitor and discourage the creation of new social trails, so this doesn't become an ongoing management issue over time. And our next steps then to address social trails in the RTMP update are to update some of that criteria from the 2005 RTMP to really focus on restoration where it has the greatest water quality or habitat benefit. We'll then evaluate the social trail network within the watershed and identify those opportunities for restoration, as well as potential social trails that could be considered for adoption into the system. We'll present those social trails back to this committee and to the community this spring when we come back with those trail scenarios. And then we'll take that feedback and then incorporate it into the draft RTMP and develop that work plan for social trail restoration and stewardship.
And maybe before we get comments on this section, one thing to just remind us about the RTMP in 2005 when it was developed, the separation of social trails, system trails, and fire roads with the various classifications was in part done thinking about what the district had the capacity to maintain. So we knew we have this historic legacy of visitation on the mountain. That visitation came with, trails that the district inherited when it became a water district. We've been improving and updating those over time. But we recognized in 2005 that we couldn't maintain all of the trails that had been created, prior to the district at the same level, just from a resource capacity standpoint. And so some were identified as system trails and others were identified as non-system trails at that time. And then the district developed a criteria that was really about, let's reduce new trails. That was our kind of driving criteria first and foremost, and then secondarily kind of, to improve habitat. And it kind of went down as a way of ranking social trails and which ones we would manage in different ways. So adoption is, thinking through that there might be some where it provides an opportunity and you can maintain it to the standard that we're maintaining, or you might think about a new route because it might be an unsustainable route of a system or a non-system trail. And so those are things we're going to really get into detail as we start developing the next sections. So with that, we'll maybe take any comments or discussion you want to provide us with the social trail criteria.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Sean. Really nice background to this exercise. Jed, any thoughts, comments?
Well, yeah, I think this is one of the most important things that we're doing in this project, and I think a good reason for us to have slowed down and be thoughtful. So this is a benefit. We have dozens of miles of social trails. We're going to have to take into public input because some of them are very near and dear to people and maybe maintainable, and many of them are negatively impactful on the environment and our sensitive habitat. So I look forward to reducing a significant number of miles of these and being super thoughtful about how to create as pristine a habitat as we possibly can, while making sure that we understand the ones that might be able to be used in ways that are beneficial and that we can maintain. So this is a really important project, and I'm supportive. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Matt?
It's interesting. We were asked for a definition of social trails. The one I heard the other day was a land managing agency not able to meet the demands of their recreational user group. The public is basically telling people where they would like to explore. And I don't necessarily support that process completely, but I think it's a way for us to be able to use that information to inform how we want to do this, especially with popularity of trails, creating the set of, I think, a very responsible way to evaluate them from an ecological perspective first, safety first, water supply, reliability first as the leading ones, and then look to see, did those trails get created in areas that should have never been? And I think when we look to decommission a social trail because it's got too much of a negative net environmental impact, that those that are truly leading with an environmental ethos will respect the fact that we're closing them and not try to go and reopen them regardless of how you recreate. Because if we're going to lead like this, we need to follow with behavior that is in parallel with what we're trying to do. But that being said, we have a great opportunity to look at some of these social trails that don't have a bad impact and look to see where we can make the benefit, increase the ability for the recreational user to have a better experience. And if we can always end with a negative or a positive environmental impact through either shuttering or repurposing of trails, I think we're in a great start. So thank you for the clarification.
Thanks, Matt. Diana?
No comments.
Larry, any comments on the next steps for social trail management?
No, I think they're thinking the right way, and I look forward to working with them. Thank
Yeah,
y'all.
Sorry, Larry, did I cut you off?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I really, the way the exercise was set up in order to get a range of inputs into what to prioritize for decommissioning, what to prioritize in terms of improvement is it feels quite productive. It was a nice exercise. Sean, your comments on the fact that we inherited so much of this in 1912 when the district was established reminds me of sort of a perception I hear occasionally, which is that as visitors increase on the watershed, the ecosystem is sort of on a one-way path to continued deterioration. But then is it possible to really comment on that? At one time there was a Air Force base or Army base up there. There was a bowling alley. The fire roads were open to the public. There were a lot of people hunting up there. Or you can still see permanent camp stove structures. Even given that, population has gone up, there is more recreation on the watershed. Could we in fact be, also moving the watershed to maybe a more natural state versus how it, had been managed in the past or not managed in the past?
Yeah, I'll provide a brief comment, and then Adam can kind of help educate us on understanding how, appropriate trail design can support visitors in different ways. Yeah, the district's lands have a long history, right? It was logged. There's logging roads still there. There's PG&E infrastructure. There's district infrastructure. There was a train up the mountain at one point. There was an inn on the mountain. There's all these different uses over time. And a lot of the trails were developed by hiking clubs and by groups that were looking for an experience and were interested in getting somewhere, right? And we have a network of social trails now that we've tried to manage and to try to reduce new ones that have been created. And they are telling us something, right? They're telling us how people are using the mountain. It is open for exploring. People are welcome to come to the watershed. We encourage them to come to the watershed. We have different modes of recreation that we allow, and we, limit other recreational modes. So there's an opportunity to think comprehensively about what the district can do to support those visitors at whatever number it may be. And there are tools that you can employ to minimize the impact of visitors, but you have to be able to do something, right? And I think that's the key piece. If you can't do anything, you're cementing a condition today that what we hear from folks has unfavorable characteristics. And if we can't move and can't modify our infrastructure in terms of trail assets and fire road assets, then we're not going to evolve to a better state. And I think that this community has really driven stewardship and the thinking of the district in terms of being a good steward of Mount Tam over the years to be progressively making progress towards restoring this space and protecting that ecological function. There's just more we can do. And we know that there's modern practices out there. So maybe Adam, you want to speak to some projects you guys have had success with?
Yeah, and I mean, I think generally, to your point, many of these social trails were inherited, have been there a long time, and they weren't designed to any kind of trail standards. So there's, erosion issues, there's potentially impacts to sensitive habitat, that sort of thing. And so I think part of this process is looking at what's out there today, looking at things like the slope of the trails, the erosion coming off of different trails, the location of sensitive resources, archaeological resources, biological resources, to look at the system as a whole and figure out, again, which of these trails are sustainable and could be carried forward, and which of them, really should be restored. But then over the longer term, Sean mentioned that a big focus of the 2005 RTMP was to stop the creation of new trails. And I think there's a couple of different strategies we can look at. We're actually dealing with this, just prepared a road and trail management plan for Trioni-Annandale State Park, which was experiencing a lot of the very same issues with social trails and environmental impacts. And I think there are three kind of longer term strategies that we can consider in the RTMP. One is education enforcement. A lot of people don't want to go out and use trails or create trails that are having an environmental impact, but they just don't realize that, creating a new trail to this viewpoint is going to have some kind of impact. The other one is kind of ongoing monitoring and early closure of new social trails before they get well established and people get used to using those trails. So that's something else we can consider. But then to Director Sampson's point, a lot of times these social trails are created because that's where people want to go. There's a connection that makes sense, or there's a viewpoint or something that's missing in the trail system. So it seems a little bit counterintuitive, but a really effective restoration strategy that we found is to provide some of those opportunities that people are looking for, actually adopt or create the trails that provide the connections or the experiences, because then the trail users have less incentive to go out there and create new social trails because they can make that connection, or they can get to that location they're trying to get to on a sustainable, well-designed, formal trail.
Great. Thank you.
And we'll keep going with the presentation.
Yep.
Okay, that's a good segue into stewardship and outreach. So one of our stations was focused on stewardship and outreach, and we had a display of different signages that are currently out on the watershed, as well as our volunteer and educational program overviews, and a lot of fun visuals for people to take a look at. There were two exercises at the station. One was focused on signage outreach priorities, and then the other was on engagement priorities. So again, these were sticker exercises where people were given 3 stickers each for each exercise, and they were asked to look at a different list of visitor communication and signage topics, and then put their sticker or mark their sticker next to the top priority for future messaging and education. And then for the education or the engagement priority exercise, we asked participants to take their 3 stickers and select the program or mark next to the program they would most likely participate or support. And this was a large printout again with the different outreach and stewardship programs the district currently offers. So we received a good amount of feedback. We saw that most people for signage and outreach were most interested in trail maps and wayfinding, followed by wildlife protection and education and visitor etiquette. And we'll be taking all this input and feeding it into the plan through updated kiosks with modernized wayfinding maps and tools, refreshing educational signage, and expanding visitor etiquette and safety signage, and then also developing updated drinking water and district content that'll keep things relevant and hopefully keep going through the years. We'll be able to update that on an ongoing basis. For the engagement priorities, we saw the most interest or support in trail stewardship and maintenance at 31%, followed by Slow and Say Hello campaigns at 18% and habitat restoration at 17%. Again, all of this information and feedback will be incorporated into our plan. We'll be prioritizing community trail maintenance and stewardship opportunities, refining habitat restoration programs, sustaining environmental education and community science programs, and elevating visitor etiquette programs. And then I will go ahead and pass it back to Adam to go through, or I guess we might want to take comments.
Do you have any comments on the stewardship elements?
Yeah, I think it reflects, actually, some of the feedback reflects our earlier discussion on stewardship opportunities. I do want to make a plug for the Slow and Say Hello campaign, as was mentioned by, Nona. In addition to just the importance of that activity, I find it really inspiring in that it is a collaboration between our various stakeholder groups to achieve a common shared interest. Supporting that feels very important. So I hope we can continue to emphasize that going forward.
And I'll just note for this next section, we're very early in the development of classifications and standards and what will be designations ultimately. But we'll go quickly through kind of the survey responses that we got and where it's going to lead us to.
All right.
I have a comment too.
Sorry, Adam, just a sec. Sorry, Larry.
No problem. What I'd like to say is I sincerely, on behalf of the district, apologize to the folks who felt left out in the acknowledgements, particularly Nona and Bob. So, it was just an oversight, nothing intended, and we're sorry.
Nona and Vernon spoke to that.
Vernon, sorry.
Yep.
Right. So the next topic that we asked about at the workshop, again, relates to the classifications and the standards. And, Sean mentioned this is a fairly broad topic, and we're early in addressing this, but it does include things like trail designations or which users are allowed on which trails, as well as how the trails are designed, maintained, and managed. So we asked workshop participants to complete a 5-question survey that had questions about visitor management and trail standards. I did want to note this is not a statistically valid survey of all the district users, but it provides some great input from those 160 or so people that came to the workshop. So if we go to the next slide, I'll just walk through each of the responses fairly quickly, and then we can talk about next steps. So the first question, we asked community members about their preferences for strategies to create the more environmentally sustainable trails. The top responses, again, are shown in bold. So there's a lot of support for designing for natural water drainage and erosion control, for avoiding sensitive habitats in the location of trails, and for using native materials and vegetation in the construction and maintenance of trails. The next question asks community members about their preferences for approaches for responsible recreation and how can we reduce impacts of trail use. A couple of the top responses related to signage and maps and educational campaigns. So I think that really reinforces some of those engagement strategies that Carly mentioned earlier. And there's also a lot of support for seasonal or weather-based closures in specific trails. We then asked about safety strategies for shared or multi-use trails. So these would be trails that could potentially allow bicyclists, equestrians, hikers on the same trail. And again, there's a lot of support for signage and wayfinding. So that's kind of a reoccurring theme. But also a lot of support for improving sight lines and visibility on those trails. So trail users can see other users coming. And then also support for improved trail etiquette. So this could be etiquette education programs, as well as things like yield signs and speed limits and slow and say hello, that sort of thing. Then we asked specifically about community preferences for standards for bicycle trails. And the top feedback we heard is to include technical features. People are really looking for the challenging mountain bike experience. So they want to see a trail that's not too easy and it has some technical features. Again, visibility came up with trail grades and curves to allow that safety with different users. And then also a lot of interest in having continuous flow trails. So, those trails that are designed for bike use with, bank turns and that sort of thing to really provide the mountain biking experience. And then the last question, we asked community members about their preferences for trail sharing. And there's a lot of support for multi-use trails, again, including different uses on the same trail. There was also some interest in directional trails. And so these could be trails that are, used for a single direction for all users, or it could include scenarios, for example, where a trail could be uphill only for bikes, but could be used in both directions by hikers or equestrians. And then there's also some interest in separating trails for different users. So having maybe more single-use trails to get the bikers and the hikers and the equestrians kind of on their own trails. So this input identified some real opportunities as well as some potential constraints, and we'll consider all of this input as we move forward with updating the trail classifications and standards. And we will revisit all these topics with the committee and with the community as the planning progresses. But really the next steps are to begin updating the trail standards and the environmental protections. And the standards really, they address the physical components of the trail. Some of those things that are shown on the graphic on the slide, like the width and the slope of the trail bed, the drainage features, vegetation clearing along the trail, that sort of thing. The 2005 RTMP does include trail standards that have generally worked, so we're not starting from scratch, but we do want to review and refresh these and just make sure that they include the current best practices for water quality and erosion control. We'll also update where needed to make sure that the trail standards include considerations for wildfire resiliency and rare plant protection. And then also making sure that we consider some of those themes that came up over and over of having good visibility for trail users to see each other. And then the standards will be tailored to each of the different uses that are proposed under the classifications. We'll also update the environmental protection measures that are included in the 2005 RTMP. So that could include things like, taking another look at our procedures for protecting sensitive resources during trail maintenance. And then in the trail scenarios we bring back this spring, we'll consider different options for trail classifications and designations. So that could include things like, opportunities for multi-use trails that allow biking, equestrians, and hiking on the same trail. It could include options for those single-use trails. We can also look at more options for hiking and equestrian-only trails, as well as the potential for priority use trails. And so those would be trails that are designed for a specific use. So maybe they're designed to provide a biking experience, but they're open to other types of uses. And then we'll also, in those scenarios, present different potential management approaches that can really, seek to provide that high-quality recreation experience, but reduce some of the potential conflicts or potential environmental impacts. So that could include things like the directional trails that I mentioned. It could include alternatives for alternating days for different types of uses on trails. So maybe a trail is open for biking, even days and hiking only odd days, that sort of thing. And we can also look at those seasonal or wet weather closures, where it's really warranted based on environmental conditions or trail conditions. So I know that the trail standards and classifications is pretty conceptual at this point until we start applying it to individual trails. But we can either pause for questions, or I know in the next segment we'll talk a little bit more about the specific trails in the watershed.
Yeah, I think the next section is going to be the what is it? The highlight of the.
Yeah, and I will just mention, if I can, that the trail classification, system is really going to be something that we have to speak to as we look at each trail, right? Like there's going to be elements that we really want to dig into in terms of each trail and what it might support or may not support.
Yeah, I actually think this is maybe more important than the next section in many ways. How we classify these trails is critical. I think the idea of having single direction trails is something that could be super beneficial that the pilot could not have achieved given the time frame that we needed to work under. Same with having separate trails. These change of uses, I think could be tremendously beneficial for safety purposes, for habitat, et cetera. So I think thinking this through is really, really important. I'm glad in some ways that we slowed down the process so that we do this right. And then when we do, we will be much more buttoned up for the future. So thank you for this.
Thanks, Jen. Matt?
Yeah, I think, we're all identifying this section, and the following one is really where the rubber hits the road on this plan here. But staying on this section here, because I think this is the foundational component of what we're trying to do right here. With the review, so we have 10 classifications of roads or trails in the current plan, 9 of which have been defined, 1 still yet to be. How do you see the review or revision of the first 9 helping to identify areas where we can make improvements currently without even going to that class 10 yet? Is there an opportunity to redefine some of those classes here? Is that what we're looking to do? Or are we looking to update them, but without major changes?
Yeah, it's a good question in terms of the approach that you decide to choose in terms of the update. You could work through refining the classifications as they are, or the kind of class 10 one was being identified because there just was no classification for bike access on a trail. There's a small number of trails that allow equestrians comparatively to the overall, and then the rest of them are all hiking trails. And it really starts to get into like, what is the design standard that we're trying to achieve on trails that have different uses? And if it's multi-use, it's going to be a more complex design standard than if it's single use. Like that's just a reality that we're going to come to kind of have to shake out through this process. And that's why I was going to, it really does come down to as we start looking at the trails we're talking about, and we'll identify that in the next section, that there's different things to think about with a road to trail conversion versus an existing kind of single track social trail. And
Gotcha. So I think what we're understanding is that it's almost like a chicken or an egg thing here to some extent. We're gonna have to take a look at what's possible and then make sure it's defined and, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Larry, any comments or questions on trail classification and standards?
No, I'm cool. Thanks.
Maybe one quick thing. Someone asked me yesterday if we could just, do a change of use amendment or designation for a trail, and through that change of use, reduce the EIR requirements. Is that
we'd still be doing an environmental review for change of use.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to confirm that.
And I mean, if you're talking about one trail, that probably looks different than if you're talking about multiple trails, right?
Okay, thanks. Let's move on to the next section then.
Yeah, great. So the next section we have is roads, trails, the system itself, right? And so we had an exercise, and it was meant to be fairly comprehensive in that we gave folks maps and we asked them a couple of questions. We said, is there a connection that's not being made on the watershed that you'd like to see made? And more specifically, if this is considering bike access, what connection might that be? This is where we were trying to kind of tease out new trails that would be, an experience folks would like to see, or social trails. The second one was, what existing system trails do folks want to see bike access on or think are suitable for bike access more specifically? And then the third question was, what trails, system trails, are not suitable or do you not want to share with bikes, right? And we really pushed and tried to get everyone to respond to all three of these questions. We had a lot of resistance to that, but there was a purpose for asking all three of those questions. And folks who went through and thought deeply about that and were like trying to be collaborative in their input helped inform kind of how we could look at that data and overlay it. And it's informing kind of our thinking in terms of going forward. So the trail connection themes, right? This was when we were just saying everything's on the table. Let's talk about social trails or new trails and say, is there a meaningful connection that is not being made? And what themes we kind of were able to tease out of this input was that there's an interest in seeing a cross mountain connection. There's for bike access specifically. There's not a way to get from Eldridge Grade to Lagunitas Rock Springs Road, for example, in the middle of the mountain. And that's a connection people have been after for a long time. There's a real interest from a safety perspective of getting folks off of paved roads where cars are. So Sky Oaks Road is our main visitor road. If you've driven Sky Oaks Road, it's not your typical, highway road or, major road. It is one that we have to share and be careful when we, drive a vehicle on. And so there is an interest in getting bikes off of that road in different ways. So there's different routes that could be taken to do that. There's bike trail connections in the Pine Mountain Fire Road Loop area that folks are interested in. There's a real interest in a cohesive route down the mountain for bikes specifically. There's an interest in an off-road connection between East and Middle and West Peak, so getting off of Ridgecrest Boulevard in those areas. There's also an interest in getting off of West Ridgecrest, and there's an old fire road / trail that some have identified. There's an interest in a new route from Deer Park. So you think about kind of people trying to come into the watershed from their communities. There's been a long-standing concept out there about trying to do a new bike route or multi-use route that's on the opposite side of the creek than the school, and trying to get people up and into the watershed that way. It's kind of a funky route now that you go through the school property, and it's not a great one for sharing. There's also some interest in access to reservoirs, right? We have some trails along reservoirs. Liberty Gulch is our newest one that provides this really great experience, and there's an interest in some more of that. From what system trails do bikes have interest in and want to experience? We saw similar themes kind of playing out. There's an interest in seeing some connection between Lake Lagunitas and Deer Park via a trail that's open to bikes, a connection from the Phoenix Basin to the middle of the mountain. Again, across the middle of the mountain, there's an interest of that, or across the top of the mountain on a bike trail. There's an interest in coming down the mountain again from the Rock Springs area to Bon Tempe and what a cohesive route could look like on our system trails, and then getting folks off the road again. So some of these themes start to look very similar. There's also interest in the area around Filter Plant Road and Five Corners and how you might be able to connect those with the bike access. So you can kind of think more of a front country bike route. And then again, bike access and routes in the Pine Mountain and Kent Lake area. And so then we asked the question of, existing hiking and equestrian trails, what do you think is not suitable for sharing in its current form with a bicycle? And you'll note that these maps, and I'll go back and forth real quick, look quite similar. And, we only have so many trails. Lots of people are experiencing them and enjoying them. So this is the point. We're starting to see where there's going to be some tension around the various interests that people have. So we were really looking at what are people telling us? And we have the weighted, but we're not trying to make this a voting exercise. We're just trying to get early input on how people think about their experience on the mountain. And we know from talking to people as well as what they put here that there's a real interest in preserving, hiking and equestrian access from Marin Stables into the mountain, right? And there's reason for that. And so we would really want to respect and acknowledge that that's one of our visitors and user groups, and how do we preserve that while we're thinking about access in other ways. Also preserving hiking trails near the High Marsh Cataract, Kent. This is a heavily loved part of the watershed for a lot of reasons from a hiking perspective. And there's an interest in preserving that experience for hiking. There's an interest in hiking only routes along some reservoir shores. So we do have hiking trails along some of our reservoirs. We also have equestrian trails that need to be modified and updated in terms of their proximity to our reservoirs. So that's something we'll be bringing forward as well, and then update. And then there's an interest in hiking only near major entrances. I think this is going to be something that we see for everyone that lives adjacent to the community wants a way to come into the watershed on the mode that they're using. And there's an interest in having a hiking option to get from the Phoenix or from Deer Park into the watershed. So now we overlaid it, right? We said the trails that folks don't want to see bike access on and the trails that folks wanted to see connections or bikes on. So the green dots are kind of suitable for additional access specifically relating to bikes. Red is unsuitable for bikes. This isn't our proposal to you. This is just letting you see the raw data overlaid on each other. And so when you really start to get into this, you start to see some opportunities. There's a lot of tension, yes, and there's also some opportunities. There's a lot of interest in social trails too. I don't think we're going to be going as, big as this is kind of identifying for us. But what we were able to do is start to look at kind of how do we address those themes that we saw in those previous ones, and how do we kind of weave that needle through the watershed in a mindful way. And I want to be really specific. Right now, we're just looking at it from an access and interest perspective. We're not putting all of the environmental layers down. So there's a lot of analysis that we'll now do based on what we're showing here. The intent to show you this and get feedback is this is what we're proposing and is our scope of work potentially for advancing all of the field work, which is extensive, to help us understand trail conditions and environmental conditions and things that may need to be improved in order to support those various classifications we were talking about. And different things are going to have to happen in on different trails, depending on that standard and that use or classification that you want to see. So what we're seeing here is we tried to develop a couple options for road to trail conversion. And this is a big thing. So we're thinking about, where does the district not need a fire road, or where can rangers accept that they don't have fire road access, and what are our alternative routes, and can that be converted from a road to a trail, right? This was in our RTMP in 2005. We did a lot of this. There's still some redundancy. So we identified a couple opportunities there along Concrete Pipe Road where it dead ends, also along Rocky Ridge, which was kind of a big one for rangers to think through, but there's probably an opportunity there, as well as the Lagoon and Grassy Slope. So those are kind of areas where maybe we can have an environmental benefit simply by going from a road to trail conversion. We also looked at how do we help people get top of mountain to lakes area. So down the mountain in some way or up the mountain on a trail, depending on how you want to use it. Well, there's probably a route from Arturo to Rocky Ridge that can be thought of, and we've kind of painted it out here, thinking about a couple different system trails as well as social trails, and then it connects into the Rocky Ridge Fire Road conversion, thinking there might be a way that we can create an interesting downhill route for bikes from the top of the mountain down to the lakes, and then connecting that route around the lakes to get folks off of Sky Oaks Road, and then maybe down a bike trail route to Deer Park. And this is really trying to grab those themes that we were hearing from people and bring something forward that we can start to explore. We also saw that there was an interest getting across the mountain. So there's a top of mountain route to connect the three peaks, as well as north side, evaluating that to see if that can be improved to have some access for bikes. And then Pine Mountain. There's visitors out there. There's an interest in kind of seeing more bike access. There are some opportunities on social trails and potentially old kind of fire road or logging road features that exist in the Kent Basin. So some concepts here. In total, we're looking at about 30 miles of roads, trails, and non-system trails that we'd be assessing. And where this goes from here, just to be clear, is this isn't like the scope of the project and we're done and we're just assessing it and coming back with 3 alternatives of this. What we envision happening next is we go and do our field work. And while we do our field work, we'll be identifying maybe an opportunity that because we're thinking about putting bikes on this trail, that there might be a social trail that could be improved for hiking so that you can have an option to separate use. So we might be including kind of a hiking trail improvement as part of this consideration as well in one scenario, for example. In another scenario, you might think, oh, well, we had this idea of coming down this trail, but we found this social trail might be more appropriate. So we evaluated both and we added it here, and there's a consideration to be had. There might be an option where one could be multi-use, one could be single use that we debate. The multi-use, single-use discussion with road to trail conversion, there's probably an opportunity for multi-use that that's a little bit simpler to get to. On a social trail, multi-use might be a little more complex. So that we're going to kind of tease those things out in these various scenarios. So I imagine you'll see some trails on multiple scenarios, but with a different identified classification for consideration. So today we're here to get feedback on this as kind of our scope for doing our field work, and then that'll drive our next steps for community input as well, which we'll get to in the final section of this presentation.
Quite a lot, Sean. That's, I mean, I will say I was not expecting that we would be moving. We would have moved this far in terms of using the community input to start to make to start to analyze the opportunities. And so personally, I'm very grateful for you for getting us to this point. I like the process that's gone into it, but I'd like to hear from board members to see what you guys are thinking. Matt, you want to start?
Yeah, I think, thank you very much, one, for in just over a month being able to analyze and put together all the comments from the community, be able to put together this presentation. It's moving very quickly, so I just want to reinforce appreciation for that. It's interesting because after coming out of the pilot program, there's quite a few, myself included, that were a little bit disappointed about how things went. We put a lot of energy in as a district, but now I sit and smile because we have a much more comprehensive way to look at this. And I don't mean just from additional access for bikes. What I mean from that is other recreational groups being considered, how we deconflict things out there, how we're taking into consideration other various competing interests, whether it's protected plants, animals, or what we heard quite a bit was a safety issue going on. And so I'm very excited that we have this map to look at and start as a stake in the ground now for your work that you need to get done, as well as all the community input needed now, because we have something that we are showing the community now to be able to comment and make or be able to make inputs on. This is not something that's being dropped at the last minute. This is visible. This is now public. Please take a look at it and start to make comments, because we're going to use those. Your staff will use those to help make this happen. But I do think, once we get through looking at things and evaluating things through an environmental lens and a water quality lens, you brought up the safety issue. And for me, there's a trail conflict component of that, but really there's also the user group component. And when we start talking about getting cars off or bikes off paved roads at the top of the mountain, that's a really big deal. And so we're making things much more safer, and we're also defining pathways that will be maintained. The rangers will know what's going on. There'll be a lot more, I guess, situational awareness so that we can better help should anything happen on that. So, looking at this right now, I think this is a good start. I'm really excited to see what will come out of this next in terms of various options, whether it's down one-way trails, shared use trails. I'm not sure I'm ready to go too much further without seeing what would be shown as an example. But I do like the concepts in general, meaning that we have a loop now. You can start at your office out in the watershed, ride up, around, and down without having to get on paved road. That's a big plus. We have the ability now to look at different types of experiences, really big plus. But when we do these things, we're distributing the users throughout the mountain, which I think inherently is going to be an increase in safety because we have less conflict. You're getting folks out of just one concentrated area and allowing them to explore. It's a really big deal. And we're doing so in a way that we've evaluated that's safe and environmentally friendly for the mountain. So very excited to see, and again, appreciation for how quickly we're moving on this. I think it sends a signal that we're serious about this. And we want to make this happen in a relatively short time. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Jed.
Thank you for this detailed update. I think your process is super thoughtful. I hope that all stakeholders agree and will give input, that the plaintiffs of the previous lawsuit, should they not agree, let us know what they like or don't like about this earlier than at the last minute. But the goal here is community input, involvement, move forward. Marin Water is absolutely not done trying to improve our road and trails, both for bikes and everybody and the habitat. So well done, and we'll keep going.
Thank you, Jed. Larry, any comments on the analysis of community input to start to develop a plan for trail updates?
He's not on.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Terry. Well, we'll see if he comes back. So I guess, Sean, now we're going to get into the next steps where you can start to evaluate these options.
Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge that this is the access component of this process, right? We started talking about stewardship and restoration, our social trail criteria. So for each of the scenarios that come out of this now, after we do the assessment of these trails, we'll be identifying social trails that could be closed in our most sensitive habitats to be that restorative part. And I think we'll have different kind of concepts for restoration in each scenario based on which trails we're looking at and what we're thinking about doing at those trails. So I just want to clarify, like, this is access, but the restoration part is to be layered on as we do that field work, and especially in regards to kind of that on-trail restoration, right? There's opportunities, and we're going to be looking for those on-trail restoration opportunities as well. So with that, I'll hand it to Carly.
Sean. So as Sean was just saying, we're really going to start diving into the analysis at this point. We'll start off with the initial GIS and field assessments. So we'll be analyzing priority trails to evaluate current environmental conditions and usage, evaluating restoration opportunities, and identifying trail restoration and stewardship actions. Coinciding with that, we'll also be organizing and advertising the community site walks that we mentioned earlier. We're planning to host 3 of those in the new year. So that'll be happening in the first few months of the year. And then alongside those components, we'll also be going through technical studies and additional analysis to support the RTMP and environmental review. From there, we'll start really diving into developing those scenarios that we've discussed a little bit throughout this presentation. We'll develop the restoration and stewardship priorities, which will really make up that backbone of building the scenarios out. Sean touched on that a little bit. We'll do that through considering reroutes that would improve water quality or habitat conditions, evaluate areas for decommissioning social trails and sensitive habitats, and identify on-trail stewardship and restoration actions. From there, we'll start further developing access scenarios for further input from the community and the board. We'll review current environmental conditions and visitor trends, examine community input and access interest, assess improvements to hiking, angler, and equestrian routes, evaluate visitor management approaches, and consider a range of options for bicycle access. Again, road to trail conversion, biker multi-use classification, new trails, and social trail restoration. And these range of options for bike access will help build out our classification system. So we'll start diving into that. And then as far as schedule, from January through March of 2026, we'll be hosting those 3 community site walks, as well as completing the analysis of the watershed trails, roads, and natural resources to inform scenarios. And we'll be coming back to the Watershed Committee with an update on recommendations and trail scenarios on March 19th. And then following that in May, we'll have another community workshop and open house, again, focused on the key recommendations and trail scenarios. During the summer through fall of 2026, we'll be preparing the draft RTMP and begin CEQA review. And with that, we'll take questions.
Yeah, and I'll just mention with our regard to our site visits, which is our next steps, we're really debating, is this geographically focused or topical focuses of the site visits that we do, and we're going to be thinking like, are these weekdays or weekends, and how can we support the type of visitation to these sites that folks want to have. We're probably not going to get to every road and trail that's listed. It would be a pretty comprehensive, tour every day if we were going to do that. But we're not intending to answer every question that folks might have. The intent is to get them out into the field, onto the trails, to see the conditions that exist, and to start asking the questions that we can, integrate into our analysis to respond to and inform kind of the recommendations in those scenarios. So just to put that out there, and then we'll take any questions you have now.
Great, thanks. Final thoughts or questions? Matt, do you want to start?
I think you guys have done such a great job this morning on this process so far. But I just want to make sure that, March 19th is the next big date for us, and that's going to be preliminary trail options. And so just again, for the public, if they want to comment on where they think they should be, can you just remind everybody one more time, please?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have an opportunity to do the site visit if they want to come in January, February, and March. And then, as we said, we'll present again in March with the intent to get more input from folks in May.
Okay. Is there a way that folks can sign up to make sure they're aware of what's going on?
Yeah, so on the website, the Roads and Trails Management Plan on the district's website, there's an email sign up. So signing up for that, you'll get all the notifications.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Jeff?
Yeah, I just similar. I want to make sure that everybody feels like they have been able to provide input on this, and specifically the Marin Conservation League, the Audubon Society of Marin, and the Native Plant Society of California, that they believe that this process to date is going the way that they had hoped and expected, that our CEQA review is on the right path and meets with their expectations, and as well as everybody involved. So if not, let us know, let me know, and we'll try to make it better. But it looks good to me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jed. Is Larry back?
Yes.
Larry, any comments on the sort of the wrap up of the update to the RTMP and the selection of trails based on community input for further evaluation?
I agree with the comments that have been made and have nothing to add beyond that at the moment.
Great. Thank you, Larry. I think on the surface, this whole process, everything we've been discussing related to the RTMP and prior to that, the recreation management feasibility study, could be construed as, ways to either manage, expand, or control recreation on the watershed. But as you continually try to emphasize to us, this is so much more than that. It's about a very important component of all of this work is restoration and environmental management and managing recreation in ways that promote overall sustainability. I think that's so important to continue to iterate, and for all stakeholders that feel like there are additional items that need to be considered or inputs that should be brought forth, as just repeating what Jed said, I hope they will be very proactive in that regard. Adam, it sounds like through with Ascent, you've been through similar processes in other settings. you know, I'm sure there will be bumps in the road going forward. What are some of the key items that we need to be looking out for that could potentially, really delay or slow progress?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important, and I think we've tried to emphasize that public engagement early on. I think that's always a potential pitfall if we don't understand the issues going in, and then something comes out of left field, late in the process. So we've, as Sean's described, we've been very proactive in trying to let people know about the input opportunities, and trying to get that input early on. I think the other piece is balancing moving forward with the planning and making sure that we have the technical analysis to support it at the same time. We don't want one to get ahead of the other, so that that we're moving forward looking at the community input, but also doing that technical analysis to make sure that all the recommendations in the plan are well supported, are based in science and based in rigorous analysis. And I think an added benefit of that then, as I mentioned earlier, is that can hopefully streamline the CEQA and the environmental compliance process. I think those are some of the big ones. I mean, I think it's, whenever doing any kind of land management or recreation planning, where you have really invested community members that love the watershed, it's hard to please everyone. And so I think trying to find that middle ground that addresses the key issues, but not getting into an activity where we're kind of responding to votes or just responding to the loudest voices, making sure that we're keeping all the different interests in mind and trying to balance that middle ground.
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable. I think your point, so much it feels like is so many of the perspectives we hear, including my own, I think can be based on anecdote often, and hopefully, we're not going to fall into that pattern. Any other board comments or thoughts before we ask for public input? No, Terry, can we open it up?
Yes, we have 9 speakers. Amy Worth and Bruce Lowenthal, please.
Amy, is that you?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
We're both. I'm Amy Worth. I'm fortunate to be a native of Kentfield. And so I think I've experienced in my life as a constituent of Marin Municipal Waterlands, from being a child going on nature walks with my mom to environmental education in elementary school, to being on the cross-country track team at Redwood, running on the trails, uh, leaving and then returning. I had a mountain biking phase, raising our children and repeating the process and seeing them as educators. And now I'm not throwing myself into the elderly, but I think they're another constituent. I am expecting a grandchild soon. So seeing, the coming full circle. I wanted to thank Carl and Sean and Lauren first for all even before this presentation, the amazing hard work, your due diligence. I wanted to welcome Diana Mayer. I'm glad to see a woman on the board. And then more recently, Adam and Carly. And my question is, I think, most specifically, and maybe I can talk to someone specifically, but I was very involved. Unfortunately, I was working and traveling, so I missed the 6 original workshops on the feasibility study. I did participate, I thought, quite a bit in the board meetings since then. And I, for one, was very happy to see that you paused on the mountain biking project. I actually believe in terms of, what your actual mission is and a number of your strategic objectives and your 5-year strategic plan, that allowing mountain bikes on trails and any type of e-bike makes it more difficult for you to accomplish your goals. And I had written a letter summarizing all the economic points and fiduciary points and legal precedent about why we might consider not allowing bikes on trails in April of 2024. I think I may have missed something because seeing this term social trails surprised me, and maybe I was keeping an eye, but maybe I missed meetings for input. I feel social trails is a euphemism for people who broke the law building illegal trails. So I'm kind of puzzled, I think, why, it seems like a done deal that mountain bikes will be included on trails. Also, I think we should pin down e-bikes. So my question is, who can I provide written input? I was out of town for the 2-day thing, but who, if it's Adam or Carly, who may I provide written input to that's considered the same way the survey was tabulated? Yeah, ideally, if not, can I take the survey in an electronic form? And that might be good for constituencies like older people who may not be able to go up to Sky Oaks and hike up somewhere to provide some feedback. But I think there's still a need for community input on priorities and needs.
It's worth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's keep it to 3 minutes, please. And thank you for your comments. If you have questions, just please go to our website. And I believe, as Sean mentioned, you can find information there. And I believe also just contact us after the meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr.
Hi, I'm Bruce Lowenthal. My family has been paying money to the Marin Municipal Water District since its inception, and probably before that to the prior city. So we've been around and paying for lots of time. I went to the open house and I thought it was phenomenal. I thought that you did a phenomenal job there. I mean, yeah, there could probably be a few more items, but they really did a great job, and I really like to see that. I had sort of two comments in addition to that, but one is there's a lot of rules and a lot of them look reasonable, but compliance is not adequate at this point in time. Too many people go on roads and bikes that they shouldn't, and so on and so forth, and I think people know that. So when we're developing the plan, we need to figure out better what needs to be done better, sorry, is how to make sure compliance occurs. Maybe there has to be some enforcement officers. Maybe there has to be some other kind of enforcement. Maybe we can get volunteers to help on enforcement. But there's too many cases where the rules, the reasonable rules are violated. People making technical trails, for instance, on their own. The gravity car road, from Mountain Home in up is a great example. If you walk that, you can see what's going on there. And the other point I have is I think that the ratepayers ought to have a bigger say than non-ratepayers in what the policies are going to be. And one of the things that I would have liked to see at the open house was some way to indicate that you're in the water district or not. I'm a docent on the East Peak, and I know that a lot of the bike riders that come up there are from places, outside the water district, from the East Bay, from San Francisco, from the peninsula, from Nevada, so on and so forth. And so I think that, when you make decisions, because there's going to be trade-offs to be made, I think that the ratepayers ought to have at least a bigger say than people that aren't ratepayers. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Bill Keene, Andrew Levine, and then Larry Minikis.
Good morning, Bill Keene. I'm on the board of Marin Trail Stewards and also the director of advocacy. I want to thank staff and consultant Adam. You guys are doing a great job. I think this is a reasoned approach and makes sense to me. I think that you have addressed two of the issues that I had. One was a top to bottom route. The second was safety. There's one remaining one, which is circumnavigating by trail around the mountain. And I think there's some opportunities to do that. And I look forward to working with you on making this a reality. It's actually more than I thought we would see today. And I feel really good about the direction we're going. And I thank you for supporting it.
Thank you.
Hello, Andrew Levine from Mill Valley. Mostly want to echo what Bill said, to thank Sean and Carl and their staffs and the district's approach to this, which, just like the pilot approach, was very inclusive, thoughtful, brought in experts from the outside, trying to really do this in a comprehensive and collaborative manner. And I see that happening again. So I just want to pass along my appreciation for that. And just add a few quick comments. Good trail standards and good trail placement can aid in the BIFIP and your fire protection things by controlling and access to and the environment around trails can enhance your actions on those other important tasks. I would also add kind of to what Bill said about trails maybe on the south side of the mountain. As a Mill Valley guy, everything we put up there is on the north side of the mountain, but we're in the water district as well. And it's a long way to go to get to some of those. And it's interesting when people mention stuff like that, lots of people coming from out of the area and they're riding on trails and things like that. That's because in the rest of the world, people figured out how to share trails and parks allow that. So it's shocking. Yes, you do need signs and things like that if you're going to constrain people in ways that they don't see that elsewhere. So that's part of the education component when we do create varied trail usage. We need to educate people, and people will, if they're treated with respect and given places to ride, they'll ride on those if they understand why and where they're not supposed to. If you squeeze them so there's no place they're allowed, they're going to go everywhere. So I appreciate, though, again, the comprehensive approach, and I look forward to all the future input and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry Menikis, Peter Hivezi, and Krista Hoff.
Yeah, good afternoon now. And I appreciate all the great comments, and the work that's gone into this is really impressive. And it's forward looking, but I also think I want to make a comment about looking back. And while it was touched upon, one concern I'd like to raise is the presentation does not fully acknowledge that longstanding deferred maintenance of the existing trail system has played in many of the conditions we are now trying to address, which include erosion, trail safety, trail widening, and the proliferation of social trails. For many years, too little work has been done to maintain drainage, tread, and aging infrastructure built to outdated standards. And that history matters. Users often respond to damaged or unsafe conditions by creating informal bypasses, so deferred maintenance is part of the environmental baseline, not just a behavioral issue. I would like to encourage the district to more clearly state that rehabilitation and maintenance of existing authorized trails and roads is a foundational priority, and that future access decisions will be sequenced in a way that does not compete with addressing those legacy impacts. Doing so would strengthen the plan, improve credibility, and better align it with the on-the-ground realities. And I think it's important to also recognize that the greatest source of erosion is our fire roads, and that these really must be addressed, particularly in light of climate change and what we're seeing occurring on the mountain. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Hivezi, and then Krista Hoff, then Jamie Mackey.
Hello, I'm Peter Hively. I was lucky enough to grow up here. I've been hiking on the mountain since I was a little baby in my mom's backpack. I've been biking on the mountain since shortly after that. That's me. I just wanted to say I appreciate the work of the staff and the consultant developing this plan. I appreciated the opportunity to participate in the public workshops. It was very interesting, very informative, and to see the results so far and the amount of data that's already been collected, the amount of feedback that's already been collected, is really impressive. So well done, and thanks for everyone that's been involved with that. I look forward to future opportunities to participate in the process, And just as I've enjoyed previous opportunities to volunteer and engage in trail stewardship, I look forward to further opportunities to do so. I'm really looking forward to the site visits to get out and look at the trails and see what it is we're talking about. I think that's something that could have been done better as part of the pilot project. If we can get out and look at things before we start making any real decisions, we can make better decisions. Thanks again and keep up the good work.
Thank you. After Krista Hoff is Jamie Mackey.
Hi, I'm Krista Hoff, Off-Road Director for Marin County Bicycle Coalition. I wanted to again say thank you for all of your hard work on this. It looks very comprehensive and the open house was amazing. I got heard from so many attendees that they really appreciated all the detail and the opportunity to really interface with all of you there. So we really appreciate your efforts there. I also want to appreciate your consideration of cyclists in this. We hear a lot about safety, and I think that getting bikes off of the road where they're sharing with cars is a huge safety consideration. When I'm riding up there with my son and my daughter who are just learning to ride, you know, that is a terrifying experience, making those connections from one fire road to another on a narrow paved road with cars is really dangerous. So I appreciate your consideration of those connections. It was nice to see them highlighted there. And also, I just wanted to remind everybody that social trails are made by all user groups, not just cyclists. So there's hikers, there are dog walkers, there are equestrians who are making a trail because they are seeking an experience. And it's not just cyclists who are doing that. And the map that was shared showed that there are a lot of trails that are not built by bikers. So just wanted to remind everybody of that. So thank you for your work. I look forward to continuing this process. And I was wondering when the site walks would be decided because it's, you know, coming up in the new year, and just want to make sure we all have time to put that on our calendar. Thank you.
Thank you. After Mr. Mackey, we're going to go to Linda Novi, then George Foreman.
Hi, my name's Jamie Mackey. First, thank you all for all the work you've done. I know this has been a lot for you all the past couple years. It's very much appreciated by me and my family that use the watershed almost daily, it seems like.
Sorry, go ahead.
What I wanted to really relay was my experience not having grown up in Marin and having been here for the last 15 years is that especially after today, I'm really seeing, you know, the talk about the deferred maintenance and all the things that have been pushed off in the past that are now coming to a head and having to be dealt with by the water district. And I see that direct correlation with the maintenance of trails and the roads and the infrastructure also being relatively similar to the exclusion of bikes on trails. Everywhere else I've lived in the country, I think it's relatively normal to have people share trails. And I think not having that be part of the community here in Marin has caused some of this fear of having bikes on trails, and some of the distaste that people have between, or that user groups have for each other. And I think we're seeing that come to a head just as much as we have the problems that have also been kicked down the road in the past. And I think I really feel that we will see a lot of this fear and not wanting to share trails. I think we'll see a lot of that disappear as we see the education goals taken forward into having people that are using these trails understand how to share, understand how to behave on the trails. When I got my first mountain bike in college, it was explained to me like on the first ride, here's the little triangle that tells you who to yield to. Here's you yield coming uphill. Like it was an integral part of me becoming somebody that used off-road trails. And I feel like that is missing here. And just like it's going to take a little while to move forward and fix our infrastructure. It's going to take a little while to move forward to have people get used to interacting with each other on the trails. And I think that can happen. And I've seen it. I live on San Francisco, and I've seen it in real time happen with how much more engagement I have with the community when I ride Eagle Rock Trail with my son. It has just been so eye-opening to see people share that trail and have such a good time. And I get to run into neighbors, and I spend time talking on that trail. It's such a fun aspect of living in Marin. And I think that can continue in the watershed as well. Thank you.
Okay, we have 6 speakers on Zoom. Linda Novi, George Foreman, please. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. I had to leave the meeting, so I'm on Zoom now. Great comments, and I did attend the workshop one day and appreciate all the work that was put into it. Thank you to staff and the consultants. I want to emphasize that the visitation on the watershed has increased so much that now I would say, just like bikes want to get off paved roads, equestrians, and I'm a president of Marin Horse Council, we want to get off fire roads. And we want to get back on some of the prior trails that have been allowed to overgrow that we used to have access to. So that's sort of an interesting development. A previous speaker spoke about the need for compliance, and I think that is really first and foremost. Maybe it's going to be a gradual thing, as the last speaker just said, but I do think that compliance should start being measured and monitored now, and there need to be consequences for the lack of compliance as this process goes forward. Sean, I'll be reaching out to you. There are a couple trails I want to make sure will be on the site visit list, and Marin Horse Council looks forward to actively participating. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Foreman, and then Laura Cheriton, please. Go ahead, Mr. Foreman.
Thank you. And I'd like to start by congratulating and thanking the board for undertaking this process. I've been hiking, trail running, mountain biking, and until 1999, riding horseback on the watershed. And there are hardly any trails on the mountain with which I'm not personally familiar. And I've watched with growing dismay over the years as trail surfaces have deteriorated, and both legal and illegal mechanized use has intensified. And based on my experience, one is directly correlated to the other. And I would encourage the analysis of this process to adopt a matrix of time, place, and manner. Time is important. When a particular trail is used, both time of year and time of day is important, because the same activity can have very different impacts, both on the physical environment and other user groups, depending on when the activity occurs, as well as on wildlife, etc. So a bicycle ridden down a hard-packed, dry fire road in midsummer is likely to have little or no impact on the road surface, except when the brakes are locked up to skid. That same ride on a soft, muddy day will leave ruts that channel runoff straight down the hill into the reservoirs. And in addition to leaving sharp-edged ruts when it dries, that makes even walking difficult in the dry season. And right now, bikes are using fire roads and illegal single-track trail use under wet and dry conditions, with obvious consequences. On steep slopes, with soft trail surfaces, impact of bicycle tires on surfaces is even more pronounced during the rainy season. Skidding during the dry season removes leaf cover and churns up subsurface gravel, making foot travel hazardous. Equestrian travel is already prohibited on the steep single-track trails, and relatively few horses are ridden in the areas of the watershed access from Sky Oaks. So this hasn't been a significant source of damage in recent years. But most of these single-track trails are barely 36 inches wide. Bicycle handlebars are, 24 inches wide? There's just no room to pass, particularly on steep slopes.
and when bikes are being ridden swiftly down these trails. This goes to the issue of enforcement, of which there is very little. So putting bikes, people on foot, people on horseback, people with leash dogs on narrow single track trails at the same time of day is inherently creating user conflicts at best, at worst potential injury, or if a horse is surprised by a speeding bicycle, even death. I'll
Thank
submit the
you.
balance of my comments in writing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Ms. Cheriton, please, and then Dennis.
Thank you for the last speaker. I agree. One of the issues I'm having trouble with is enforcement. It seems almost non-existent. I seem to encounter a lot of different circumstances where there are violations, anywhere from off-leash dogs to bicyclists on single track trails racing downhill, as well as an amazing amount of ill treatment by mountain bikers and e-bikers. I've been hiking there on the mountain for about 50 years. And having it in my life has been one of the blessings. I think a lot of money is being spent and time and energy to educate and outreach. If people were given a test and needed a permit, that could be achieved with much less time, energy, and money. I also want to put a shout out for the lack of concern for the wildlife that's getting run over or having their biological needs interfered with by mountain bikers coming in at night and night riding in mass. I've seen all that. I hope, and I wasn't able to go to the community workshop. I would have been an hour away each way, and I was sick, and it was about 40 degrees out at my house, so I didn't see that as an option. And so, like one of the earlier speakers, I'd like to have the opportunity to have weighed in on several of those issues. The other thing that I've noticed lately is children are coming into the watershed and riding at dusk alone, unaccompanied by an adult. And the regulations are not timely. And they think the last time that you had an age limit put on it was in 1987, I believe. And so children coming in and riding illegally on steep trails is a recipe for disaster. And I wouldn't want to be their parents. So I'm asking you to look at that policy regulation. I'm also asking you to not go forward until you've mastered the enforcement and also education and outreach. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dennis, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I am not empowered to speak in behalf, although I can speak in behalf of the Marine Conservation League. I cannot speak in behalf of the three organizations that litigated, but I can say that what I have heard today is a huge amount of information, very comprehensive, that we would have liked to hear probably 3 or 4 years ago. I wish I could turn the clock back and take all of those workshops, all of that outreach, all of that talk, and compress it into and come up with this plan of redoing, updating the road and trail management plan. And you can see what information it is yielding. That should have happened probably 3 or 4 years ago, which is precisely why you were sued at the last minute. So now we have it. And what's come out is an interesting, really, contrast. It's focused almost entirely, when it finally gets down to the planning, gets down to looking at the mountain, on the mountain, at trails and routes. What it's come up with is a smorgasbord. And to be practical, that smorgasbord then is going to have to be turned into 2 or 3 or whatever very well designed routes. And you have a consultants who really did the sort of the state of the art when it comes to program EIRs, when they did the change in use EI program plan and EIR for the California state parks, and that was back in 2015. Building trails is not rocket science, but it takes certainly a technical knowledge of what works, what doesn't work, to come up with standards that are not not based on what the community would like to see, but really on state-of-the-art standards, which have been used now by Marin County Parks as they have successfully brought forward multi-use trails in a number of the open space preserves throughout the county. This can be done. It takes pragmatic view of what's really possible, what a well-designed trail may need to do, maybe even realign to avoid gradient was not included among the various criteria for standards. So go beyond, go back to, as Larry and George and others have said, go back to understanding the deferred maintenance that already exists, bring that forward, its first priority, and then begin to look for possible connections, routes for which you can actually, on the ground, have the money to design a well-designed trail. That alone will be a big deterrent to bad behavior. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. Philip Mooney, David Long, and then Vernon Huffman. Go ahead, Mr. Mooney.
Hello, my name is Phil Mooney, and I'm a hiker, runner, bike rider, and parent who loves spending time with my young family in the Mount Tam watershed. This plan really matters, and the work you're doing here matters. Recreational access matters a lot because it builds connection. When residents and when kids and when families can hike, run, and ride together on these trails, they develop the lasting appreciation for this place. And that's how we inspire the next generation of environmental stewards. To me, this plan is a start of a great balance of recreation, safety, and conservation. I appreciated hearing this presentation and the sensible approaches that I heard throughout. It makes sense to consider adapting useful social trails. It makes sense to listen to the community's input and the desire to increase access for bicycles. How you've thoughtfully planned this, how you've understood the current usage, how you've devised a way to distribute users across trails will allow more people to experience Mount Tam in a meaningful way while still protecting the watershed. After the disappointment of the failed pilot program and after so much work and collaboration, I appreciate the speed and attention this is getting. I think it's really important this keeps moving along to prove to the public, especially the biking public, that you're listening and that you care. Thanks for this presentation again, and thank you very much for your time. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Long?
Yes, my name is David Long. I'm wanted to say that the 2005 Road and Trail Management Plan specifically said it was not a recreation plan. And I'm pleased to see that at least implicitly the current effort recognizes that it's not simply an update of that plan that's required. I would like to see that more overtly stated because we talk about updating, but yet since that was not a recreation plan, it can't be updated to meet the conditions of a recreation plan. It has to be expanded. And one of the things I'm particularly glad to see is that there's a recognition that trail standards are needed because the district hasn't had any trail standards to speak of, which shows in the comments that Nona and Larry Minikus made about trail conditions because they don't meet any standards. And trail standards are really essential for, as has been recognized, for to have minimal impact on the environment, particularly for multi-use trails. And there's no need to reinvent the wheel on this. The County State Parks has standards, and the California State Parks Trails Handbook is a great resource for these things. So it's not a question of creating new standards. They're out there. It's a question of adopting them. A statement was made about social trails not being a priority to stop the new ones. And I would suggest that if there's not a vigilant plan to stop new social trails, it's like the equivalent of ignoring the advance of new invasive plants. It leads to great further damage in the future. I think there needs to be a detailed analysis of the trails, an updated inventory, but much expanded over what the RTMP did. I would like to see a detailed photo monitoring of all the trails with it being made public. With cell phones today, it's very easy to do, and it would show that some of the trails, for example, in the past that were publicly labeled good and may have come from the RTMP, were in terrible condition when the pilot projects were proposed. And it's too easy in a report to label a trail by, let's say, good when it has lots of problems on it. And the kind of photo monitoring that's easy to do uh, would indicate really what the condition of the trails are, far better than some general classification. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vernon Huffman, please.
Vernon Huffman, Marin Trail Stewards. A couple of the callers brought up some points that were very helpful to go ahead and get out on the table. One of them was riding in the rain. That is something that when you manage for trails and you work with a user group and provide a management, adaptive management, if you will. That's what we do at Tamarancho, where we have 10 miles of single track trail built by mountain bikers for mountain biking. It's bike priority. We allow hikers. We just say it's bike priority, so expect bikes. There we have rain closures, and tomorrow, in fact, we will be putting up the signs because we have the weather forecast. We keep a close eye on it. And so we'll be closing down Tamarancho. We have a brand new trail we just opened over the weekend called the Caballo Rojo Trail, Marin's newest 1 mile of downhill trail. Really exciting. And so we'll be closing that down tomorrow. So to address that one caller's concern, I agree. And when we manage trails effectively, we also care for them. And as a user group and a leader of a user group, I commit to managing these trails sustainably. And the other thing that one of the callers addressed was wear and tear. And again, as a trail steward, that's what we look for. We look for places where the dirt is leaving a trail, and we say, how can we fix that? And that was what was really exciting about the pilot trails is we got to go in. One of the examples was the Madrone Trail. We, with the district's leadership, we found this is a horse trail, so the ruts were about 2 feet deep on Madrone, and it was an opportunity to address that impact, and we fixed it. And we filled these ruts, 2 foot deep ruts, along with some of the other the Seas crews, brought in material, filled those ruts. But when we came in as the trail stewards, with our experience, we figured out how to rechannel the water and create reverse grade dips and move the water off of the trails. So we're anxious to get in there and help you keep these trails sustainable by working with a user group like Marin Trail Stewards. That's what we commit to. We don't want to just have access and walk away and just say, okay, good luck. No, we're there we're committed. So let's get moving. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your input. We've said we've wanted as much input, so we're happy to receive it. And we are certainly listening to be continued. Our next Watershed Committee and Special Board meeting is scheduled for March 19, 2026. That's a Thursday. It'll be 9:30 a.m. Thank you, everyone. With this, our Watershed Committee and Special Board meeting of December 18, 2025 is now adjourned.